Good morning. Would you please be seated? Thank you. Welcome to the City Council regular meeting of May the 11th, 2017. Councilmember Trevino. Councilmember Warwick. Councilmember Villagran. Councilmember Saldana. He is joining us via video conference. Councilmember Gonzalez. Councilmember Lopez. Councilmember Medina. Councilmember Nuremberg. Councilmember Cryer. Councilmember Gallagher. And Mayor Taylor. Mayor, we do have a quorum.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our San Antonio City Council meeting. I'd like to invite Councilman Nuremberg to introduce our invocator.
Good morning. The Reverend Ann Helmke is an ordained Lutheran minister who has been actively serving in the San Antonio community for almost 30 years. She has served in a congregational setting, but her real contributions to the greater good are the networkings between many congregations and many faiths with an emphasis on civic engagement. For the past 7 years, Ann faithfully served as the first director of spiritual services at Haven for Hope, a unique transformational center that directly serves in helping people transition from being without permanent shelter to a sustainable home in their lives, including faith and a spiritual home. As of February 1st, Reverend Helmke relocated offices and expanding the work throughout of all of San Antonio in the full-time position as the first faith-based community liaison for the city of San Antonio. She is one of the co-founders of the San Antonio Peace Center, where she continues to volunteer in this all-volunteer interfaith organization for over 20 years. Ann has also served as adjunct faculty for the University of the Incarnate Word and Texas Lutheran University, teaching prayer and spirituality. Her life expresses a commitment to an active spirituality, living the dynamic between action and contemplation at the intersection of faith and society. Blessings in her life include 2 beautiful daughters, 2 wonderful sons-in-law, 1 vivacious little granddaughter, and the most recent arrival of her gorgeous grandson. So welcome, Ann.
Thank you. Well, I rarely get everybody to stand for me without asking. That was nice. Thank you for this honor and for inviting me to invoke and to call in the best and greatest spirit among us. And I would be remiss not to thank all of you and to take this opportunity on behalf of the San Antonio faith community for saying yes to this so needed faith-based initiative and for the honor to serve in that way. So thank you. I've chosen this morning for the invocation a blessing. And it is an adaptation from the prayer of St. Francis. And I do so looking towards our tricentennial and those Franciscans who came and started the missions. So that's why I chose it. I invite you to keep your heads up for the blessing, to keep your eyes wide open, and even to look around to see all those leaders all over this space who will be receiving this blessing together. May we be blessed as instruments of sacred peace. Where there is hatred, let us sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Bless us that we, all gathered here, all of us as leaders, bless us that we may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving of blessings that we receive blessings. It is in the pardoning of others that we are pardoned. And it is in the ending of each day's best intentions and spirits that we may be blessed again into the rising of a new day filled with potential. May these blessings be so in each of our lives, in this council chamber, in this beautiful city we call home, in this world that we are blessed with simply as gift. Amen. America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A todas las personas que quieran oír la celebración de esta reunión del Concilio de la Ciudad en español, pasen por favor por un receptor a la izquierda del podio. Gracias.
All right, thank you. We'll move to item number 3, approval of the minutes for our April 5th to 6th meetings. We have a motion and a second for approval. Please vote.
Yay.
Motion carries. Okay, we have 2 brief points of personal privilege. We'll start with Councilman Medina.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning. It's my privilege to welcome some very special guests this morning from St. Paul's Catholic School. Guys, can y'all stand up back there? We have young leaders from the 5th grade through the 8th grade from St. Paul's School, and I also want to welcome their principal, Ms. Crow, for coming down to City Hall and seeing us in action. Let's give them a big round of applause. These young leaders are part of the student council, and I did promise them that we'd keep it exciting this morning. So hopefully we can keep our end of the bargain. But thank you all so much for being down here. And then secondly, very quickly, wanted to recognize Councilwoman-elect Ana Sandoval, who's in the audience this morning. Good morning and welcome.
Gracious. All right, okay, thank you. Councilman Cryer.
Thank you, Mayor. I would be remiss when I saw him in this hall if I did not recognize the presence of Dr. Francisco Cigarroa. I see my good friend Red Weaver here, the chairman of the chamber this year. Dr. Cigarroa, in addition to other things, was an outstanding chamber chairman, but more importantly, he was a tremendous leader of the University of Texas Health Science Center. Left that post in order to become one of the finest chancellors I've had the privilege of working with in the last 30 years. And more importantly than all of that, I think he would agree, he has saved literally thousands of small children's lives as one of the finest pediatric transplant doctors in the United States. So it's a treat to have Dr. Cigarroa in the hall with us this morning, Mayor, and I'd like to ask everybody to recognize him at this time. Thank you, Cisco, for coming.
Thank you, Councilman Cryer. Okay, at this point, I'd like to ask council members which items they'd like to pull from the consent agenda. Are there any? Okay. All right, hearing none, I will call the citizens who've signed up to speak on the consent items. We'll start with Christopher Herring. Is Mr. Herring here? And we have quite a few people who have signed up to speak on other items, so we're going to do 2 minutes per citizen today. Good morning, Chris.
Good morning, Mayor. Good morning, Council. I'm Christopher Herring. I'm the chairman of the 5-year contracting diversity plan that the city put into place to help to enable small minority businesses to be able to have an opportunity to do more within our city's procurement. This morning, I'd just like to say that SJ&J Solutions is one of the contractors that you have the opportunity to approve today to do power washing at the airport. We believe that the 13-year history of SJ&J Solutions is right on time for our city, and this business resides in Rey Saldana's district of District 4. And so, again, we feel very confident in their abilities. I'd like to thank the Economic Development Department, Renee Dominguez, Mike Sinden, for really working with SJ&J Solutions when it was determined that there might have been some discrepancy in terms of the initial award for the contract. But after the due diligence of the staff working with the aviation department, we feel very confident that the right company was chosen. And so again, I'd just like to thank the city for all of its efforts to definitely to make this situation a win-win for the city of San Antonio. We think that it's great when we put more money back into the pockets of our small, local, minority, women-owned businesses, and SJ&J will do us proud. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Herring. Jack M. Finger.
Well, Madam Mayor and other members of the best city council money can buy. By golly, I don't say those words lightly at all. Nope, sure don't. And Mr. Saldana, he's viewing this everything remotely by TV. Of course, my question, Mr. Saldana, to you is, Mr. Saldana, are you truly a real city council person, or do you just play one on TV? Yes. Anyway, on to the business that we have here. Item number 8, big construction contract with various players in the political scene here down at the City Hall. But, and you know, y'all are going to pass a contract with these construction companies, Bain, Medina Bain, oh gee, who else? Golly, just a whole bunch. Oh, can I have an audio visual, please? Yes, but I just want to let you know, I found out that a number of you have received campaign finance contributions from this company. Yeah, put that there eventually. But you know, Madam Mayor, you're only supposed to receive a maximum of $1,000 for the mayoral contest. Put it on the audio visual and blow that one up there, especially on the circle in the lower right-hand corner there. There you go. From Ms. Bain, you got $5,000. It says, yeah, How the heck did that happen, Madam Mayor? Yes, I also noticed that, well, every single one of you received campaign finance contributions from the company the shareholders of the company whose contract you're about to vote on item number 8. Just sail right on through. Yeah, in fact, Madam Mayor, you got $13,000, Madam Mayor. And Mr. Nurnberg, well, he only got $2,000 or so. That doesn't bode well for Mr. Nurnberg and his campaign. But Mike, shucks, is it going away per present? By God, even you got a few bucks. What is it? Yeah, 500. Every single body. It'll be fun to see if anybody abstains.
Thank you, Mr. Finger. Okay, we'll entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda. Okay. We have a motion and second for approval of our consent agenda. Please vote.
Yay.
Motion carries. We'll move on to item number 4.
Item number 4 is an ordinance authorizing an extension to the cooperative agreement among the City of San Antonio, Texas, Texas General Land Office, and the Alamo Endowment Board to provide for design and implementation of the Alamo Master Plan and approval of the Alamo Master Plan and conceptual approval of the following: closing of Alamo Street from Houston Street to Market Street and Crockett Street from LaSoya Street to Bonham, repairing and relocating the cenotaph, and the future conveyance to the state of Texas the rights-of-way and parts of Alamo Plaza that are necessary to reclaim the historic Mission Plaza.
Mayor and Council, I'd like to begin this morning as we introduce a number of speakers to talk on this topic. So let me begin by saying that on behalf of the City of San Antonio, Councilmember Roberto Trevino and I serve as members of the Alamo Management Committee. And for nearly 2 years, Councilman Trevino and I have actively participated in the development of the ideas and concepts that will be presented today. Thank you, Mayor Taylor, for appointing both of us to serve on this very important committee. These concepts were developed following the guiding principles for the restoration of the Alamo buildings, plaza, and surrounding development area. guiding principles developed by a 21-member Citizens Advisory Committee appointed by the Mayor and Council in early 2014. Co-chaired by Maurice McDermott from the Whitty Museum, Sue Ann Pemberton from the Conservation Society, and then Councilmember Diego Bernal, now served as tri-chair by Councilman Roberto Trevino, and downtown business, tourism, historians, and native populations. The guiding principles developed by the Citizens Advisory Committee were approved by the City Council in late 2014 after more than a dozen work sessions and public meetings for citizen input. Under the leadership of Texas Land Commissioner George P. Bush and Mayor Taylor, a tri-party agreement was formed and approved by the City Council, and a management committee was appointed in 2015 to reimagine the Alamo and to give it the dignity and respect that it deserves. We too have hosted many work sessions and public meetings to obtain input, and we are in the process of incorporating the input that we have received from dozens and dozens of residents who have comments about the Alamo. Now, the Alamo, to be clear, the buildings on the Alamo property are owned by the state of Texas, and the street, Alamo Street, and the plaza are owned by the city. So to restore the Alamo, which we know needs restoration, and the surrounding area requires a partnership, and that partnership includes the Texas General Land Office, the City of San Antonio, and the Alamo Endowment, chaired by Gene Powell. All three parties have equal say in this process, and the management committee represents 6 individuals, 2 from each of the 3 partners. The action recommended today is not final design approval. Today we are presenting to City Council a framework for moving forward on the Alamo project. It is another step in our journey. This is a work in progress. In a moment, you will hear more details of the recommendations, but let me just summarize up front what we are recommending to the City Council today. And again, this is not final approval of a design nor the selection of materials to be used, but rather concepts we are asking for your approval. And they include the following: to restore the Alamo building and the Long Barrack, to recapture and delineate the historic footprint of the Alamo and the plaza. This does include the closure to vehicular traffic of Alamo Street from Houston to Commerce and a small portion of Crockett Street. It also includes the conveyance of the public space to the General Land Office in the future, because they will be operating and maintaining the entire property when it is completed. It also includes the restoration and relocation of the cenotaph. The creation of a world-class museum and visitor center is also a part of the concept plan presented today, and this will be done in the Crockett, Woolworth, and Palace buildings across the street from the Alamo. Those 3 buildings have already been purchased by the General Land Office with funds appropriated by the legislature in 2015. And as you know, we have a pending request before the legislature for $75 million in funding to continue the process to restore the Alamo and surrounding area. As an aside, let me just say that we continue to work on a downtown entertainment district to relocate the businesses that currently operate across the street from the Alamo. And you will hear more about that later this year as we develop plans for those businesses in partnership with them. Also, we are recommending the continuation and extension of the tri-party agreement between the General Land Office, the city, and the endowment, so that the city can continue to be a partner in the restoration of the Alamo and surrounding area. It is a formal process to close and convey streets, and we will begin that process following today's action if the City Council approves the concepts that are being recommended to you this morning. As we move forward, the Alamo project will continue to be developed with the utmost respect to its layers of history so that we can return the dignity and reverence to this important site that is important to the city, to the state, as well as the nation. Lori Houston, Assistant City Manager, has worked as staff on the Alamo project since 2012 and is going to provide a presentation this morning, followed by comments by Councilman Trevino as a member of the Alamo Management Committee. With that summary, Mayor, I'd like to ask Lori Houston to come forward with the presentation this morning, and then Councilman Trevino will also speak as a member of the committee.
Thank you, Cheryl, and good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm honored to be here today to present to you such a transformational project for our community and the state of Texas, and one that has such an international impact. Today, you are going to hear about the Alamo Master Plan, and you'll be asked to take action on the master plan, as well as several components that are necessary for its implementation. You will also be asked to approve an amendment to the cooperative agreement among the city, the state of Texas, and the Alamo Endowment that will allow us to continue our strong partnership through the design and implementation phase of this master plan. The city has been working on the redevelopment of the Alamo Plaza for decades, but the earliest master plan or concept plan that this council would remember is the one that the city commissioned in 2012. The city hired Project for Public Spaces to do a concept plan, and we asked them to come up with recommendations for that plan. After several stakeholder meetings and public meetings, PPS made several recommendations related to the visitor orientation and interpretation of the site. And those recommendations included differentiating the footprint and delineating the footprint, closing streets, and increasing programming and interpreting the acequias on the site. City Council received a presentation on that PPS concept plan, and later on, they established a 2014 Citizen Advisory Committee that was appointed by the Mayor and City Council to, one, look at the recommendations in the concept plan, two, create a vision and guiding principles that would serve as a framework for a master plan moving forward, and three, update a 1994 Alamo Plaza study that was commissioned by the city and at the time led by Councilmember Howard Peak and Councilmember Roger Pettis. And that study also mentioned we need to close the streets, we need to delineate the footprint, we need to enhance programming, and it specifically recommended creating a museum in the three buildings across from the Alamo Plaza to include the Palace, Crockett, and Woolworth building. So the advisory committee that was appointed by the mayor and council started to implement that charge. They met several times. They actually met 14 times. All meetings were posted and open to the public and well attended. They had public meetings and presented to a council committee and a city council meeting and a briefing. And in December of 2014, City Council approved the vision and guiding principles that that committee created through public input. And they also approved the themes that they updated after review of the 1994 Alamo Plaza study. The vision for the master plan is to engage. We must engage locals and tourists in a way to personally connect them to the Alamo. We must tell the story of the Battle of the Alamo, its impact on the Republic of Texas, the city, the state of Texas, the United States, and the international community. We must include and interpret all cultures that contributed to the site and that lived, fought, and died there. And we must tell the in-depth story of those cultures in the Alamo area from present day and as a tribute to all that lived, fought, and died there. The committee also created 8 guiding principles that would serve as a framework to help guide the visitor experience. And those guiding principles include tell the entire story, but use the 1836 battle to get people to the site and serve as a portal. And when they get to the site, they learn the entire 300 years of layered history. There must be unified leadership of the site. Preservation and interpretation must be based on historical and archaeological evidence. The site must be accessible, both physically and intellectually. We must balance history, myth, and folklore. We must enhance the visitor experience and recognize the continuum of history, and also connect the site to other areas in the city of San Antonio and tell the story. And finally, City Council endorsed the themes that were created by the 1994 Alamo Plaza study and later reviewed by the 2014 committee. And those themes are tell the story of the evolution of the sites and the cultures around the Alamo. That includes the story of the indigenous people, the story of the Spanish settlers, the story of the Tejanos, the Texians, the immigrants, the slaves, and the freedmen. Make sure we tell all those stories of those people and how the site evolved. We must tell the story of the Battle of the Alamo and tell the story of the politics of the Texas Revolution, the story of both sides of the military battle, and tell the story of what led up to the battle. How did it impact the townspeople surrounding the battle area? And then finally, and most importantly, this space must be a place of honor, and it must remain a community gathering space. So these vision and guiding principles were adopted by Council in December of 2014, and less than 7 months later, our city celebrated a monumental accomplishment, which was the designation of our 5 Spanish colonial missions as a World Heritage Site. And this was a huge accomplishment after 9 years of work. We were the first site in the state of Texas, and we're only 23 in the United States. And less than 5 months later, there was another monumental accomplishment, and that was the city and the state came together, and they agreed to work together on a master plan for the site. As Cheryl mentioned earlier, the site's ownership is bifurcated. The state owns the church and the long barrack and the grounds. They now own the 3 buildings across from the Alamo Plaza, and the city owns the Alamo Plaza to include the Plaza de Valero. We've each done our own separate master plan and concept planning process. And for the first time, the city and the state are coming together to do a master plan together. And why is that different today? And that's different because we have the leadership engaged at both the city and the state. We have a private endowment board that is supporting this effort. And more importantly, we have a community-driven vision process that was embraced by both parties, both the city and the state of Texas. So in October of 2015, the city adopted the cooperative agreement, and that was executed among the City of San Antonio, the General Land Office, and the Alamo Endowment Board. And that provided a framework of how we move forward together to do a master plan. But more importantly, that community-driven vision and guiding principles served as the foundation for this cooperative agreement and must be embedded through this master plan process. The agreement also created a 6-member committee that included representatives from each entity. City Manager Cheryl Scully and Councilmember Roberto Trevino served representing the City of San Antonio. Alamo Endowment Board Chair Jean Powell and Ramona Bass served as representatives of the Alamo Endowment Board. And Ann Itzel and Kim Barker represented the General Land Office. The cooperative agreement also identified an executive committee, which was led by Mayor Ivy Taylor and Commissioner George P. Bush. This agreement, moving forward, really helped us as we move forward and hit the ground running with this master plan effort. Their first line of work was to identify and select a world-class team to do this master plan. The management committee met weekly, sometimes 2 to 3 times a week. And in March of 2016, through a competitive and international process, they selected Preservation Design Partnership as the master planning team to lead this effort. Dr. George Skarmeas is leading PDP. He has extensive experience in World Heritage planning. He led the planning effort for Independence Hall. He also served on the board of U.S. ICOMOS and was actually the chair of the U.S. ICOMOS in 2010 to 2013, and is also a commissioner on the Commission for the United States, the Commission for the U.S. National Commission of UNESCO. And he was very familiar with our World Heritage application when he went to the actual interview for this opportunity. George Scarmeas also was joined by Mario Shetnan of GDU out of Mexico City. Mario has a lot of experience in World Heritage site planning as well. And then locally, we identified Fisher Heck Architects, led by Lewis Fisher, who has experience across the state of Texas in restoration projects. So we had our dream team, and that dream team was charged with creating a team of experts. And we created a team of experts to get us through this complex master plan. One of the experts I'd like to point out is Patricia O'Donnell with Heritage Landscapes. Patricia has worked on numerous World Heritage sites and numerous Indian burial grounds. So she has a lot of experience in this component of our master plan. But locally, we have a lot of experts, and that includes Pape Dawson Engineers, led by Gene Dawson, the DeBerry Group, led by Trish DeBerry, and Jim Gray of Rialto Studios. So we have a master plan team led by world-class architects that includes experts to help us address this complexity of this master plan. And our first order of business after the selecting the master plan team was to continue the public engagement process. So we picked up from 2012 and 2014, and we kicked off our archaeological campaign. And that campaign was led by Nesta Anderson with Pape Dawson and our very own city archaeologist, Kay Hines. They performed 19 briefings through a 4-week period. They would do the digs, go out daily, present to those who were interested on what they were finding, why they were doing this, and why it was important to this master plan. Those briefings provided opportunities for those who attended those briefings to ask questions. And we also posted those on Facebook, and that was done through Facebook Live, and individuals watching it through Facebook could also ask questions. The Facebook Live campaigns had over 100,000 views. We also had 4 city council briefings, so we would come to city council and brief council on our efforts every 2 to 3 months. We had 5 public meetings, and we continued to engage the Alamo Advisory Committee, and we actually had our 6th advisory committee earlier this week. We had 80+ stakeholder meetings and continued to meet with the businesses surrounding the Alamo area monthly. And then, of course, we had our YouTube and Facebook campaign. This public engagement will continue through the design and implementation of this master plan. But today's master plan is an evidence-based master plan whose foundation is the vision and guiding principles that were driven and created by our community, and is based on the public input and the evidence and research that we have collected to date. There are 5 key concepts in this master plan, and they include the restoration of the church in Long Barrack, the delineation of the footprint, the recapturing of the Mission Plaza, the creation of a world-class museum, and the creation of a sense of arrival and enhancing connectivity to and from the site. The first priority, and the most important priority in this master plan, is to restore the church and the Long Barrack. Without its restoration, we do not have a site to master plan. The church is in severe decay. As you can see, the rocks are failing due to erosion and chipping, and this is an external view, and this is associated with drainage and the inability for moisture to evaporate. If you look in the interior of the church, the bottom 2 pictures, you can see black pieces of paper on the bottom of the church floor, and you can see the stone crumbling. So as you can see, the church and the Long Barrack are in extreme disrepair, and this master plan proposes a conservation program that'll take the next 4 years to restore the church in Long Barrack. And the state of Texas will be putting $40 million towards this effort, and that is priority 1 in this master plan. The next key concept we're requesting approval of is to reestablish clarity and order through the delineation of the footprint. The footprint of the Alamo is about 3 acres. And what we're proposing is to interpret the original south gate that was there from 1724, when the mission was established, and until 1836, when Santa Anna had the walls destroyed. This will not be the only entrance to the plaza, but we want this to be the primary entrance. And we want this to be a way to orient the visitors to the site. We also need to make sure that we understand the relationship between the 1936 garden and the actual Alamo complex. The 1936 garden, which you see identified, and it's to the right of the acequia, or east to the acequia. We acquired that property in the early 1900s. It was created as a memorial garden in 1936. It was never part of the original footprint of the Alamo. However, when you go to the Alamo and you go to the back to an event or to the Alamo Hall, you think that that space is part of the Alamo complex. And that's where we do all the reenactments and demonstrations. It is programmed daily. We have activities, 3 to 4 activities a day in that garden. This master plan proposes to remove the rock walls surrounding that garden, create a more welcoming perimeter, and relocate those activities that currently take place in the 1936 garden to the actual historic Mission Plaza where they would have taken place. And so we are actually removing walls and opening up the 1936 garden for the public to enjoy. And so by reestablishing clarity, we're approving 3 things: to delineate the footprint. How we delineate that is a design issue. Interpret the south gate. Make sure people understand how they entered the mission and the fort from 1724 to 1836 and use it as a way to orient visitors. And finally, create and improve the 1936 garden and make sure there is an understanding that it was not part of the actual compound. The next key concept is to recapture the historic Mission Plaza. And to do that, we must close Alamo Street from Houston to Market and Crockett Street from La Soya to Bonham. We're recommending to interpret the acequias dated back to 1719. These acequias are important features as they helped irrigate fields and provided water to the community. We are proposing to lower the elevation of the Alamo Plaza to the living surface, and that means lower the elevation 18 to 24 inches, and what that does is it also helps with the restoration of the church in Long Barrack, and with that evaporation issue I mentioned earlier. We have moisture that's getting trapped in those walls, and they cannot evaporate, and that is because the sediment that continues to build up on the plaza. So by lowering it, we're also able to recapture the plaza, but it improves the restoration efforts of the church in the Long Barrack. And finally, this key concept proposes to repair and relocate the cenotaph. The cenotaph is in need of repair. If you look at the structure, there are visual signs that the internal structural system is failing. The rock on the structure is also failing and chipping, and key components of the carvings are missing. So we're proposing to disassemble the cenotaph, repair it and clean it, and then reassemble it, and then relocate it to a place where it has appropriate context and symbolic meaning. We are looking at locations. One of the locations we've identified is a funeral pyre that we know existed over on Market and Commerce Street. It's the location where the Samuel Gomper statue is today. But by relocating it to that potential location, we are placing it in appropriate context with symbolic meaning, and we're also able to tell the expansive story of the Alamo. So people understand the story just didn't occur at the Alamo site itself. It expanded beyond the site. In fact, there is a tomb in San Fernando Cathedral, and we're able to help interpret the site and make people understand how important and expansive this story is. We are proposing to repurpose the buildings into a world-class museum. The GLO acquired these buildings in 2015, and these buildings will be repurposed into a 135,000 square foot museum. The museum will include a rooftop garden and restaurant and a visitor center. Now, this museum does not mean that this is the only museum on the site. The actual site should be treated as a museum. If you walk into the courtyard, it'll be activated with those 1936 garden activities that currently take place. And we'll be able to expand those activities. Right now, the activities that take place at the Alamo are limited to the 1836 event. We want to expand those activities to cover all periods and cover all stories, so we can bring back the chili queens and we can bring back the reenactments and the cooking demonstrations. And so the plaza will be activated throughout the day. And then, of course, we have the church and the Long Barrack. And so the museum is 135,000 square feet, but the entire site will be dedicated to the interpretation of all stories. And the final key concept is to create a sense of arrival and enhance connectivity between the site and other public spaces. And so by closing Alamo Street, if you are heading north from the Torch of Friendship, there'll be a pedestrian-only promenade that will take you to the Alamo. This will help enhance the connectivity between our other important amenities such as La Vita and Hemisphere and the San Antonio River. We also are proposing improvements to the Paseo that lead you from the river to the Alamo Plaza, as well as improvements to Houston Street, La Soya, and Bonham. This will help create the sense of arrival and serve as a way to interpret and provide wayfinding, and also connect to other important sites in downtown to include our cathedrals, our plazas, La Villita, and other attractions. We also are able to recapture and create more public space as a part of this master plan. So by closing Crockett Street and Alamo Street, we actually provide 5 acres of public assembly space in this area. Right now, there's only 2.2 acres of public assembly space, and that includes the plaza, the Paseo, and Blum Alley that connects you to River Center Mall. Now, we have had several public meetings, and we've taken this input into consideration, and we will be continuing to take this input as we go through the design and implementation phase. However, I have concluded what the master plan addresses in those 5 key concepts, but I want to address the issues that have come up during the public process and how we plan to address them through the design and implementation phase. The first is public space. As I mentioned, the Alamo Plaza and the Paseo and Blum Alley only include about 2.2 acres. The plaza itself is about 1.8 acres. The proposed master plan increases this public assembly opportunity from 2.2 acres to 9.5 acres. And it expands the opportunities for community celebrations, ceremonies, and First Amendment rights. As a result of the implementation of the master plan, the Alamo will remain a place for community to gather and celebrate, and will now have 9.5 acres of public space. The Alamo Plaza will be open to the public and will increase in size from 1.78 acres to 3.9 acres. The plaza will be activated daily with educational programming, as well as the military ceremonies that we continue to have 2 to 3 times a week, celebrations and community gatherings. The 1936 garden will now be an open space. As I mentioned, we are removing the rock walls, providing a more welcoming perimeter, and that will also be a place for ceremonies, community gatherings, and celebrations. And finally, the Plaza de Valero will expand from 1.24 acres to 2.9 acres, providing more opportunities for community gatherings, celebrations, and ceremonies, as well as a place to exercise your First Amendment rights. You will still be able to do everything you do at the Alamo today with the implementation of this master plan. I also want to mention parades. We have worked closely with the Fiesta Commission, and Byron LaFleur with the Fiesta Commission is here today. We've worked closely with the Battle of Flowers Commission and the Fiesta Flambeau Commission. The parades will still happen at the Alamo. We have worked closely with these organizations to make sure that we can reroute them, but they can still meet some of those ceremonial issues that they have. And that is the wreath-laying ceremony that the Battle of Flowers has. And so we are rerouting the parade down Bonham, and then twice a year, we will lower the bollards on Crockett and allow the parades to pass through, and they'll continue down Crockett, and then on Alamo, and then continue to Commerce and head west. Once they hit Crockett, the Battle of the Flowers parade will be able to stop and lay their wreath and continue on. So the parades will be accommodated, and they will still be able to do that wreath laying ceremony that we've all grown accustomed to. There will be more shade in the plaza. The master plan proposes to add 102 new trees and transplant 15 trees. We heard this concern through the public input, and originally we did propose to remove and relocate those 15 trees in the plaza. But we have decided that the master plan must keep those trees. And so even though we have to lower the elevation to the living surface, we will move those trees, but then replant them when that effort is done to the same location or within the vicinity. Those trees were planted in 1976, and they do provide shade, and we'll make sure they stay in the plaza. We will also add 102 new trees to the plaza. So there will be shade in the plaza, in fact, more shade than there is today. Another concern we heard through the public process was the issue of porosity and accessibility. The Alamo Plaza will continue to be accessible. The master plan proposes to interpret the south gate and use it as the primary entry point, but it will not be the only entry point. And we will have more access points to the plaza, and those will be addressed through the design process. And then all improvements will be ADA compliant. One of our guiding principles is accessibility, and that means intellectual accessibility and physical accessibility. And we will make sure that the plaza is accessible, and that'll be done through the design process. And then I'd like to mention the entertainment district. The state of Texas did acquire those 3 buildings. Those 3 buildings will be repurposed into a museum, but currently they occupy thriving businesses. The city and the state are committed to those businesses, and we've been working on identifying a location for an entertainment district where they can move to, but also thrive. So we continue to work with Ripley's Entertainment and Phillips Entertainment, and we hope to have an announcement on that effort in the summer. Now, the project we anticipate will be about $400 million. The city of San Antonio has already identified $38 million. That includes the $1 million from the 2012 bond program, the $16 million in the 2016 and 2017 capital budget, and as a result of the successful 2017 bond program, we now have $21 million. The state of Texas appropriated $31.5 million to the Alamo in the 2015 session, and the current request is $75 million. And finally, the Alamo Endowment, they are committed to raising $200 million plus to make this project work. We did hire TXP and John Hawkinyos to do an economic impact study of what the implementation of this master plan would do. And based on his study, we will create 4,000 permanent jobs that will yield earnings of $112 million. The city of San Antonio's annual tax revenue will be $9.5 million, and the state of Texas, $17.1 million. There is a return to both the city and the state, but most importantly, a $400 million improvement as a return to our community in improving this area. Today, we are asking for City Council to consider the Alamo Master Plan. The Alamo Master Plan includes those 5 key components. Restore the church and the Long Barrack, delineate the historic footprint, recapture the Mission Plaza, repurpose the buildings into a world-class visitor center and museum, and create a sense of arrival to the site and enhance connectivity. That is the master plan that we are requesting approval today. We are also requesting conceptual approval of various components necessary to implement the master plan, and that includes closing of Alamo Street from Houston Street to Market and limiting it to pedestrian use only, closing Crockett Street from La Soya to Bonham and limiting it to pedestrian use only, repairing and relocating the cenotaph, and the future conveyance by a mechanism to be determined at a later date to the state of Texas the rights of ways and the plaza that are necessary to recapture the historic footprint. And finally, we're requesting approval to continue our partnership through an extension of our cooperative agreement. Our next steps include continued public engagement. We've just really started the dialogue. We need more public engagement throughout the design and implementation process. We are going to continue to engage our advisory committee. We will have more public meetings. And when the management committee selects the architect or architects and the interpretive planner for the museum, the plaza, and the restoration efforts, then we'll begin the design process. HDRC will provide design review and input, and they will also have to approve any amendments that we make to the view shed that protects the Alamo. The Planning Commission must make a recommendation with regards to the street closure. And when we go to Planning Commission, we will have the traffic capacity study that shows that there is minimal impact to this street closure, as well as doing a connectivity study and then also updating the downtown transportation plan. The success of the 2017 bond program included improvements to Broadway and South Alamo, so we need to see how those improvements would impact traffic throughout downtown. And we'll present that to the Planning Commission as well, who ultimately makes a recommendation to City Council, who ultimately takes action on the street closure. The Zoning Commission would need to approve any viewshed amendments, and then City Council will need to consider the street closures, the land conveyance, the viewshed, and an extension of any other master agreements necessary to implement this plan. So the process has just begun. There'll be more public dialogue, and we're requesting approval of the master plan so we can initiate the design and implementation phase. I'd like to pass it on to Councilman Roberto Trevino for the rest of the presentation.
Thank you, Lori. Great presentation. I also want to thank Cheryl Scully for joining me on on this presentation, and of course want to thank the entire Alamo management team, Kim Barker, Ann Idsel, Ramona Bass, Jean Powell, and I see Lou Mormon is also here, who have been very, very active in this entire process. We're here today to vote on a once-in-a-lifetime project that will impact generations of San Antonians to come. This point in time is the result of a great deal of work and countless hours of preparation and engagement, including the input of our community through their individual voices and at numerous meetings. While working on issues that concern the places we celebrate, cherish, and find comfort in, such as Brackenridge Park, Lerma's Nightclub, Centro de Artes, and the Alameda Theater, I have learned that we must work together to ensure cherished places and spaces are protected, preserved, and also reflect the needs and wants of our community. This collaborative approach is one that I embrace and one that is in place with this project. This is the standard to which I hold myself and the standard to which we have and will hold this project. As the sacred shrine of Texas, the Alamo represents all these things to us. It holds the layers of our history, many of which we have forgotten. This effort to unearth and preserve our past while connecting to our present and future has been the mission for this endeavor. This is why a 21-member citizen advisory panel was created. This is what informed the guiding principles that were created by the panel. This is why a diverse professional team was assembled, one that includes renowned local, national, and international partners. And this is why our partnership with the state to preserve our sacred treasure is historic. We have heard and we understand the importance of this place, this plaza. As San Antonians and as Texans, this plaza has been our place to make our voices heard as we call for justice, and it will continue to be. Let's be patient, as something will emerge with this incredible process, a place of honor where our layers of history transcend time and are embodied by the spirit of we the people, where our culture and opinions can be on display. We will listen. We know the importance of this undertaking. We know our place in the continuum of Texas history. As Davy Crockett so eloquently said, let your tongue speak what your heart thinks. The people have spoken. Now we must let the place speak to us about what it needs. We know, although much work has been performed, there is even more work that lies ahead. At this point in our endeavor, I am constantly reminded of one of our guiding principles of understanding and healing. We are prepared to take that step. At this moment, I would like to invite and thank, of course, my fellow tri-chairs, Ms. Maurice McDermott and Sue-Ann Pemberton, to come up and talk a little bit about those guiding principles. Maurice, Sue-Ann.
Good morning, Honorable Mayor and members of City Council. My name is Sue-Ann Pemberton, and I would like to take this opportunity to provide some of the background and the process of our assignment, which was to review and update the 1994 Alamo Plaza study. In March of 2014, then Mayor Julian Castro appointed 3 people to chair what would be called the Alamo Plaza Advisory Committee: Maurice McDermott, and councilman from District 1, which was then Diego Bernal, now represented by Roberto Trevino, and myself. Other appointed members represented the 1994 Alamo Master Plan study, the history and archaeology, federal government, private sector owners, tourism, and 10 council district appointees to create a 21-member San Antonio committee. Additionally, members of the General Land Office and other state agencies participated in those meetings. After 14 very intense 2 to 4 hour meetings, very passionate discussions, and many, many history lessons about the various layers of that history, the vision and guiding principles evolved. What became evident that this is a very big history to tell, spanning centuries, and we must tell it well. The vision and guiding principles were vetted to multiple public meetings and were adopted by City Council in December 2014. Many people and organizations here today in the audience also observed and recorded all of those meetings. The master plan concepts presented here today align with those vision and guiding principles. I received responses from more than half of our committee members who expressed their support of these concepts and look forward to these ideas developing and moving forward. It is the committee's goal and our charge to ensure that the vision and guiding principles, themes, and goals will be followed and evident as the master plan and design evolves and interpretation progresses. We look forward to an active role in this actual design and fascinating history of place. Thank you for allowing this team to play a key role in the San Antonio that we call home.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. And good morning, Mayor and City Council. Thank you, Councilman Trevino, for your eloquent statement, which we agree on completely. My name is Maurice McDermott. I am one of the tri-chairs. I underscore what Sue-Ann Pemberton's comments and that this committee worked tirelessly, wordsmithing every sentence and bullet point of the vision and guiding principles. I just want to identify a few of those selected points. It is the bountiful environment of San Antonio that attracted what is now San Antonio for people for 12,000 years. For that same reason, the Spanish chose San Antonio as the edge of the empire, establishing the presidios, the mission-led Indian towns, and eventually civilian towns. It is why the Mexicans established a strong presence here. Indeed, San Antonio emerged as the center of the frontier for centuries. At the time of the 1836 Battle of the Alamo, Tejanos, Indians of the Mission, Mexicans, freedmen, slaves, Texians, and of course the famous narrators of the horrific siege of the Alamo, a time burned in the conscience of us all and why we're here today. These immense and culturally complex stories that are itemized in the Alamo area experience, vision, and guiding principles are at the center of San Antonio history and identity. It is not surprising that change in this city, at the center of the city, evokes some anxiety. I congratulate Assistant City Manager Laura Houston for navigating through the multiple community gatherings and for incorporating modifications to the master plan as a result of community input. The master plan that is before you today is creating a space large enough for the complex narratives that the museum, the recapture of the historic mission footprint, and the renovation of the church are all critical to ensure the reimagining of the Alamo. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for supporting this master plan. I congratulate the tri-party leaders for the masterful work before you and the leaders behind me to the left who have been tenacious in seeing this through. The advisory committee looks forward to engaging with you in the interpretive strategy as we move forward with the design. Thank you.
Thank you, Maurice and Sue-Ann. We certainly look forward to that, to further public engagement and your leadership in that role. I'd also like to call up Mr. Ramon Juan Vasquez to say a few words as one of the members of the 21-member advisory committee and to talk about respect for the site and the process which we undertook.
Good morning, Mayor, Councilman, Councilwomen. Let me begin by saying that our organization has been involved in the Alamo process since 1994. Members of my family were very instrumental in the closing of the plaza, the street in front of the plaza. And so we've been fighting for our rights as indigenous people from the missions for a very long time. Members of, I'm here representing living descendants of people that descend from the Alamo. And it's been a very interesting process for me because I saw my father doing this in the 90s. I saw members of my family do a ceremony inside the Alamo because of human remains that were excavated, and in 1995 we had to put them back. And so it's a history that I really don't want my children to experience. And so fortunately I was selected back in 2014 to sit on this Alamo Plaza committee, and we shared 18 months of our lives together, and it was a very tough process, but we worked diligently to develop the guiding principles that are providing the foundation for the work of this master plan. And so over the years, we've seen a lot of faces change, and we've seen a few constants. And a few of those faces that have been involved in this process since 1994 are in the audience. But for the most part, we've seen a lot of people change. We've seen mayors, city council members. And so our interest in this is to continue to provide leadership from an American Indian community. We are the oldest American Indian organization in the city of San Antonio. We were founded by Mission Indian descendants. They still are at the helm of the work that we do as our organization. And we are here to work in a cooperative way with the leadership. We also want to thank the leadership because of this process, because it's been a grueling process. It's a very contentious, it has been a contentious issue. And we look forward to the rest of the dialogue. The American Indians in Texas at the Spanish colonial missions, we understand the stage that we're in this development. We're at the beginning. We're still in the beginning stages. We haven't talked about the cultural planning, which we understand is just as crucial of a conversation as the one we're having today and that we've had in the past. And so we're looking forward to that process. We also look forward to continuing to participate in telling the story of our families instead of having that story told to us. And so we appreciate all the cooperation that we've received over the past few years. And as I said, we look forward to continuing to move forward, and we support the recommendations and the process. So thank you again, Councilman, and also the leadership of this team. And I just encourage us to move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez. We look forward to that continued collaboration. At this moment, I'd also like to invite Mr. George Scarmeas, the lead master planner for our entire team, to talk to us about reconstruction versus interpretation and the strategy that we undertook and where we are at this point. Mr. Scarmaez?
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss this important issue. This debate has been going on for over 20 years and has been discussed at several venues and several levels. The City of San Antonio has made an extraordinary effort to make the site a World Heritage Site. It is an incredible accomplishment, something that is very difficult to do if you take into consideration that we have only 22 sites in the United States, and only 10 of them are cultural landscapes, including buildings and elements such as what we have here. History can be presented in two ways. One is through the actual evidence, and the other is how we can interpret and present it to the public. In San Antonio, at the Alamo, we do have probably some of the greatest evidence ever, because the site and the buildings can tell us the entire story. They're lying in front of us. It is the elements that we found through archaeology and research that took place over a long period of time, and the buildings themselves that are actually the testimony of the history that took place over 200 years, over 300 years. Reconstruction is something that has been entertained and discussed in a number of ways, in a number of venues, but I'm greatly concerned about attempting to do this at the Alamo for a very simple reason. Right in front of us, we do have the actual evidence, the archaeology that tells us the entire story. Attempting to do reconstruction on top of the actual archaeology and the evidence would destroy these important artifacts and historic fabric irreversibly. And this is something that is not accepted by the state of Texas, by the city of San Antonio, by the nation, and everybody who is involved in cultural landscape planning and design. We do have the actual fabric, the real McCoy, to help us tell the story. So if we are to do reconstruction, we need to be careful so that we have evidence, we have historic artifacts, we have authenticity, we have integrity, and most of all, we have accuracy. When we have people coming from all over the world, they need to see and understand what is in place. So my advice to you all is to think about interpretation, to think about capitalizing on the wealth of historic fabric that you have in front of you, and tell the story that is in front of you through physical evidence. As we've said from the beginning of the master plan, do an evidence-based plan and design. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scarmaez. Thank you to the entire master plan team for all your hard work. So there's been issues about, or questions about traffic in downtown, and I'd like to have Mr. Gene Dawson talk to us how we've been studying this and talking about traffic issues and how they would be impacted downtown San Antonio. Mr. Dawson.
Yeah, Gene Dawson. Thank you, Councilman, Mayor, Council. We have been looking at the traffic downtown as part of this process and closing Alamo and Crockett. As Lori Houston mentioned, we're actually looking at 3 different areas of traffic. First is capacity. How does the closing of Alamo and Crockett impact the adjoining streets? Do they have the capacity to take the traffic? And we have completed that study, and there is capacity in downtown for the redirection of traffic off of Alamo and Crockett. However, that's only one of 3 components that we're looking at. In addition to capacity, we need to talk about connectivity. For example, if it currently takes you 4 minutes to go from Southtown to North, and it will now, with this closing, take you 7 minutes, that's connectivity. And we want to make sure we don't negatively impact connectivity for those traveling north-south or east-west, and we have those studies ongoing. And then finally, and probably more importantly, as you all know, we had a very successful bond election on Saturday, and we have tremendous improvements now slated for downtown. South Alamo, Broadway, Soledad, Main going 2-way now, Commerce, Santa Rosa. a lot of economic development projects at Hemisphere and around downtown, new parking garages. So it's hard to just talk about closing Alamo Street as an individual project moving forward. So we are working with TCI. In fact, we're ongoing in a study that's looking at mobility downtown and the entire downtown grid for not only normal operation, but for event operation. And we expect to have those studies completed when we come forward to the Planning Commission with the official request to close Alamo. And we're confident that we will be able to show that we can close Alamo without a negative impact to the rest of downtown.
Thank you, Mr. Dawson. As a member of the master plan team, we also thank you for your hard work. One of the issues that came up during some of the discussion and that we were able to address quite quickly was the trees on the site. And we have Mr. Jim Gray here to speak briefly about the trees on site and what they mean and how we do plan to protect the landscape and how landscape architecture plays a major role in the planning of this project.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Jim Gray. I'm a partner in Rialto Studio. Our office is on Broadway, and we're looking forward to the bond election improvements there. That said, I'd like to address just very quickly the notions of tree preservation on site. People are emotional when it comes to trees and tree preservation because we want to preserve living things. It's very important to all of us. And then there's always that notion of shade because we live in South Texas, it's hot here, and having a tree to stand under is something that we cherish. So regarding the master plan, there are a couple of very, very old trees on the site, the wall oak in the courtyard of the convento, and a large pecan tree in the 1936 garden. They were there before it was a 1936 garden or a convento, and we're intent on preserving those trees in particular. But then in addition to that, there are trees that have been planted since. And I think the trees that have been the topic of the most discussion are the trees in the current Alamo Plaza. They're relatively newcomers. Most of those trees were planted in the late 1970s, early 1980s, as part of another Alamo master plan or Alamo redevelopment. Those trees are going to be preserved. They're going to be preserved either in place or by moving them, changing the grade, and then replacing them. We've done this process successfully in other major venues throughout Texas. I would cite the Texas Capitol back in the mid-90s when the Capitol was expanded with an underground building, office building portion. The trees that are there today are the trees that were there before that underground building was constructed. So we can demonstrate much success in preserving those trees, even though they may temporarily find a new home. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. I'd also like to call up Mr. John Hawkinos to talk about the economic impact of this incredible project.
Thank you, Councilman, Mayor, members of council. It's a pleasure to be back. Actually, it's been a while since I've been able to be here in San Antonio, and it's particularly a pleasure to be part of this project. I feel almost a little bit heretical talking about economics when we're talking about honoring our heritage in such an important way here. As you heard earlier, Assistant City Manager Houston referenced briefly some of the summary findings we found about the impact of this entire effort. Really, when you're talking about something that's fundamentally about tourism, and that's, of course, from my point of view, what this is about in terms of looking at its implications on the economy, there are two broad areas of impact. The first one is associated with the actual construction and development of your program. In this case, it's pretty interesting. You're talking about a little bit less than $400 million being injected directly into the San Antonio economy, the vast majority of which will come from sources outside of San Antonio. When you run that through an economic model, that impact approximately doubles. which means in terms of economic activity, you're looking at close to $800 million being injected, and you're looking at about 5,000 jobs that will be created for the life of the construction. So that's great, but that's not really the fundamental basis of looking at economic impact, because those impacts are temporary. What's important is what happens operationally once the project's done, and really what does it do to tourism in San Antonio. Alamo is arguably the probably strongest brand Texas has, the most iconic thing, but I'm going to be honest with you, as a tourism asset, the Alamo is actually a little bit underutilized. People are drawn to San Antonio in part because of the Alamo. They stay on site for a relatively short period of time. They go off and do other things in San Antonio. Well, that's great, but what this is going to do is, I think, really expand the time people spend on site, and by extension, both the time they spend in San Antonio and the amount of money they spend. And when you're measuring tourism, that's what it's all about. It's about heads and beds and dollars in cash registers. And so we ran all that through. We looked at what happened at other World Heritage sites. We talked to experts all over the place and thought about it. And on the operational side, and I think frankly on a relatively conservative basis, once again, you will double the existing impact of Alamo operations right now. You will go from approximately 4,000 jobs in San Antonio associated with the Alamo today to approximately 8,000 jobs. In the process, you will create, as Lori mentioned earlier, a significant amount of tax revenue for the city of San Antonio and a significant amount of ongoing tax revenue for the state of Texas, and all of that represents a terrific return on investment. So it's great to be part of this. I really appreciate it. It's wonderful to see honoring our heritage also entails reinvesting in this extraordinary asset, and I think the benefits to both the city, the region, the state, and ultimately the nation as a whole are well worth the investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Aquinones. And before I introduce our last speakers, I want to take this time to thank, again, as was mentioned, this got started in 1994. I want to thank Howard Peak, Roger Pettis, and of course, want to thank my predecessor, Diego Bernal, State Representative Diego Bernal, and Senator Jose Menendez for playing key roles in this important and momentous project. At this point, I would like to introduce Deputy Land Commissioner Ms. Ann Itzel to talk about the role of the state of Texas and the General Land Office and the incredible partnership we have here before us.
Mayor, council members, Councilman Trevino, thank you so much. It is a pleasure to be here before you today speaking to the outstanding cooperative agreement and the partnerships formed not just with the Texas General Land Office in the city, but with the Endowment Board and stakeholders around the city as well as around the state. Very pleased to say that what we have here today and what is being asked for your consideration and is being recommended to you has been met very favorably in the Texas legislature in Austin. People around the state of Texas are incredibly pleased with the momentum that has gathered around this project up until this point and what they anticipate going forward. As has already been mentioned, the state of Texas has requested through Commissioner George P. Bush $75 million this upcoming biennium in order to really kick this project off and show the state's dedication to ensuring the long-term preservation and conservation of the church, the Long Barracks, the creation of a visitor center and museum, recapturing the historic plaza, and above all, restoring dignity, reverence, and integrity to the site. With that being said, I want to thank all of you so much for your time. If you ever have any questions or any need from the General Land Office, please know that I'm here on just about a weekly basis, and I look forward to continuing that process with the Master Plan Committee. Thank you so much for your time.
And I believe we have a special guest here with us today, so I'd like to invite our General Land Commissioner, George P. Bush. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Council members. As a native Texan, as your Texas Land Commissioner and a father of two little native Texans who are 4 and 2 years old, I hold no greater responsibility than caring for the Alamo. It's the beating heart of this great city. It's the beating heart of the great state of Texas. In 2 years, in a short period of time through our cooperative agreement, I feel like we've made a lot of progress, and I want to thank everyone here today. There's a few names that haven't been mentioned that I probably should, are the business leaders, the concerned citizens that are here today, historians, archaeologists, elected officials who have participated. At the state level, those include our governor, who's been a big supporter, along with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, native San Antonian Speaker Joe Strauss, not to mention Senator Jose Menendez and Representative Diego Bernal, who represent the Alamo itself, Bexar County officials, in addition to all the members of this council, the Master Planning Committee, and of course your hard work, Councilman Trevino. It's been a great relationship that we've had. I just want to make it clear that as part of the public outreach effort that we have undertaken at the General Land Office, we're listening to the comments. And I think, Councilman Trevino, with your introduction of the testimony this morning, you're showing that we are listening, and we already have made some compromises as it relates to the plan. This is an ongoing collaboration. I think you've seen from our relationship that it's authentic, that we're real, that we've got an open door policy, and you will be guiding the way in terms of this roadmap. So I wanted to communicate that to you all. And finally, I just want to say that I think it's a good thing that there's been passion and difference. It shows that Texans care about the most visited site in the state of Texas. This truly is a defining moment in terms of the city's future. We are pleased to be a partner with you, with all of you, in making sure that we help redefine, reimagine the experience at the Alamo. So I want to thank you for your time. Again, as Deputy Commissioner Itzel had mentioned, we have an open door policy. Feel free to text, call anytime, and appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And to you and to your staff, I'd also like to point out that we have Ms. Hope Andrade sitting next to you, who's also part of the Alamo Endowment. I want to thank her for being here today.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So at this point, I'll turn it back to the mayor for our citizens to be heard.
All right, thank you. And the first citizen is Cassandra Mate, and she'll be followed by Ramiro Cavazos.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, City Manager. It's my honor to be here today. I'm Cassandra Mate, President and CEO of Visit San Antonio, and I'm here on behalf of the organization and our board of directors. You know, the Alamo is such a great source of pride for all of us in San Antonio and across the state. We're proud of the legacy, we're proud of the history, and we're proud of it's recognized by the world as an important historical landmark. And for all the same reasons we love it as residents of San Antonio, our visitors love it too. Because we have always known that it could and it should be better. The reality is the city of San Antonio has been struggling for decades to redevelop the Alamo Plaza in a way that honors the history of the site and creates a better experiences for millions of people to come here. For many people, the Alamo is hard to find. It can be confusing, and a lot of our feedback is that it seems small. You have, the reality is you have a sense standing in Alamo Plaza that it's a special place, but it's hard to understand why exactly. All previous efforts have failed because the city and the state, which owns the Alamo, were not working together. But in 2015, that all changed. The Texas General Land Office, the city, the private Alamo Endowment joined forces to do something great. I want to thank Commissioner Bush, Mayor Taylor, Councilman Trevino, and City Manager Scully for their leadership and for the enormous amount of time and energy that they have dedicated to this very project. I believe that the proposed master plan will be an enormous boost for our city, for our industry, and that is finally why we support it as the travel industry. So thank you for your consideration to vote for this ordinance.
Thank you. Ramiro Cavazos, followed by Rad Weaver.
Good morning, Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Ramiro Cavazos, and it's a real pleasure to be here this morning representing our 1,300 members, the largest independent business organization in San Antonio is the San Antonio Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, founded in 1929 as America's first Latino chamber. And I had the pleasure of going to our board over 2 years ago to seek approval of HB 2968 and Senate Bill 1327 to help reimagine the Alamo. In addition to the support that we received from the board to seek funding from the state and the local community, the focus was on restoring that integrity of the history of our community and the culture. And I just want to thank everyone that's brought us to this point. In particular, we're here at this time to express our support for the Alamo Master Plan in its broad terms. I had the honor of serving as the Director of Economic Development for the city for 7 years, and during that time saw that every dollar invested in downtown had a huge multiplier effect. And I was glad to see John Hakaños did this study, Councilman, because we worked together many of those years on reimagining all of downtown. But the Alamo is the centerpiece. And one last tidbit, I had the pleasure of, as a private sector leader in the 90s, serving on the Alamo Plaza Study Committee of 1994 with Father Virgil Elizondo, Henry Guerra, and many of the venerable folks of that time. And many of those recommendations are in this master plan, Mayor and Council. And so we're very supportive of this plan. I want to thank Gene Powell, Hope Andrade, Councilman, and the city staff, along with, of course, Commissioner Bush, for their support. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Weaver, followed by Don Dixon.
Good morning, Madam Mayor, council members. This is my first city council meeting here, so forgive me if I run afoul of any protocol. We do have something in common, though. I, as chairperson of the RMA, and Ramiro can attest to this, we used to receive regular compliments from Mr. Finger as well, and so it's always a pleasant way to end the meeting. So I'm here today speaking on behalf of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, which I serve as chairperson this year. Richard Perez, our president and CEO, is not able to be here today. He's had pretty significant back surgery, but sends his regrets. The Alamo and the Alamo Plaza are the most significant historical icons in San Antonio and critical to the history of Texas and the United States. The San Antonio Chamber of Commerce has advocated for adequately planned to fund and improve and sustain the redevelopment of the Alamo Plaza. We applaud the city and their efforts and engage in the community of this process and encourage you to continue to keep the process open as you move forward. Today's approval of the master plan is a critical step in the process, and we continue to preserve this site of important history. We respectfully ask that in order to keep this momentum, that you vote in favor of the master plan today. I would just say on a personal basis, a couple of my other volunteer jobs currently have me on kind of front row of the budgeting process in Austin, and I'll tell you it's intense. They're always intense, and this one's especially intense. And I would ask that we send a strong signal from the city here to our partners in Austin. With that, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weaver. Don Dixon, followed by Don Frost.
Hi, I may need it. Thank you, Madam Mayor. My name is Don Dixon, and I want to show you a picture. This is a picture that Jimmy Zentgraf did showing the famous Capini Memorial to the Alamo, reinserted over the Alamo. And my wife played a part in developing this book. She was a daughter. Oh, yes. She was a daughter. And so she and Helen Dimbro wrote this book, and of course they contributed much money to the support of the Alamo. A few of us were concerned about the changes that might be made to the Alamo when the GLO, General Land Office of Texas, took over the Alamo. So we had a meeting, and Carlton Souls and myself and some concerned citizens and some of the daughters we met. And one of the things we were very concerned about was moving the cenotaph. And the representative from the GLO at the time said, "We will never move the cenotaph." And that was very, very comforting, because it really ties right into the Alamo and the message that the Texans want to present with the Alamo. There is no one in this room, no one, that wants to harm the Alamo or take away from that great thing that happened. No one. But there are some major concerns, and I want to raise a red flag. One of the major concerns is removing the street, the Alamo Street, for access and visibility. This is very important for visitors coming to our city to see the Alamo, stop, and visit. Access and visibility is absolutely essential. Another thing that is concerning is the concern of reconstructing borders and walls. This public place should be open completely. The people that come, I watched them the last 4 or 5 Sundays after church, going in and seeing how they reacted to the space. That public space is beautiful. It is absolutely wonderful. It should remain as it is. That is very, very important in terms to maintaining the vision that the people have of the Alamo. Another concern is lowering the ground. I'm an engineer, so there's probably engineering ways to solve the moisture problem. But removing all of that plaza, the beautiful plaza that's there, the trees, this is problematic. So I'm just raising some red flags. And I would actually urge you all to hold off, slow down. This is a major, major, major step in turning over these public places to a state agency. You all work for the people. The people hired you. You don't work for government. You don't work for the GLO. You work for the people of Texas, and you work for the people. So be careful in your vote. I would urge you to table this. Put it down, wait for a better day, and make sure that there's no harm done to this Alamo.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Next is Don Frost, and Pat DiGiovanni has yielded his time to Mr. Frost.
Well, okay. Good morning, Mayor Taylor and council members and City Manager Cheryl Scully. My name is Don Frost, and I'm here today as chair of the Central Partnership and congratulate all to the great work we've done to get to this point. Gene, I want you to let Commissioner Bush know that we're honored he was here today and excited about the state's investment and interest and capital infusion into San Antonio. Centro's vision is a vibrant and thriving downtown that benefits the entire community, and we view this proposed investment toward the Reimagine Alamo experience as crucial to the revitalization of downtown. Coming fresh off the trail where we all worked together on the 2017 bond program, we know how invaluable reimagining the Alamo will be for the city of San Antonio. San Antonio has proven through collaborative efforts that we can find creative solutions for the betterment of our community. Pat DiGiovanni of Centro was a part of that collaborative effort. Having said that, and in alignment with Centro's mission to mobilize people and resources to build a more prosperous downtown, the board initially supports the Alamo Master Plan. Many of our 600+ members have expressed enthusiasm for the elevated experience. They have also shared comments about certain elements of the plan. As the conceptual plan moves toward a final plan, our board encourages the Alamo Management Committee to consider 3 elements, all in context of an urban environment: impact of the loss of community gathering space, pedestrian access to the site, and traffic circulation. Key words that you've heard today: access and connectivity. Our board and members embrace the idea of interpreting the historical footprint, establishing a world-class museum, the long overdue restoration of the church and the long barrack, and the establishment, most importantly, sense of reverence and respect at the site. Our city has seen a lot of investments in just a short period of time, H Park and Broadway corridor as just a couple of examples. We believe a robust study needs to be done to better understand the possible implications of a closing a major thoroughfare and what effects that'll have on your investments and future development opportunities. And I'm not talking about a traffic study, but a circulation and connectivity study, as you heard from Gene Dawson, who still has work to do. Access and connectivity to activated public spaces significantly contributes to the vibrancy of downtown. We hope that you'll focus on these critical, important elements as they embark in the next phase of the planning stage. Centro believes in and supports the significant efforts that have been made to reimagine the Alamo. There's more work to be done to help garner more support. Centro is ready and able to partner and facilitate a process to create consensus on how to achieve the balance of the great Alamo experience within an urban environment. We ultimately seek to be solution-focused for the benefit of all parties. We trust our city leaders and the Alamo Plaza Master Plan will preserve and enhance this truly iconic place. We urge you to follow the guiding principles that were established by the City Advisory Committee, and we look forward to continued public engagement. In closing, let us not allow perfection to get in the way of the better good for all, yet assure access and connectivity to maximize the project's impact.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Frost.
Thank you.
Next is Berlinda Hartwig, followed by Lee White.
Good morning, Madam Mayor. I yield my time.
To anyone in particular?
Well, Rad Weaver.
Okay,
He's
already
already
spoken.
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Lee White, followed by Bill DuPont.
Hello, my name is Lee White. I represent the living direct descendants of the Alamo Garrison, those men and women who were inside the Alamo during the 1836 siege. I'm here to discuss the cenotaph. I believe everyone's been told that the cenotaph would be moved to a more appropriate place where one of the funeral pyres were located. I'm a published author. I've studied the funeral pyres for 25 years, and I'm here to tell you no one knows the exact location, and the locations that were known at the turn of the century have since been dug up. We have actually placed a plaque on Commerce Street as close as we could to one of the funeral pyre sites. That was the only location, and actually it was more into the San Antonio River, which of course there's nothing we can do about that. And I'd like to address the supposed remains in San Fernando. That's very controversial too. What we do know is that we also have reports that there were bodies burned in the plaza of the Alamo, inside the chapel and outside. So we're talking probably about 4 pyres, some smaller than others. So what we also know is that for a fact is our defenders' souls left their bodies right there in the Alamo Plaza. That's our family cemetery. I represent, yes, Crockett, Bowie, Travis, Esparza, Lozoya, Abamillo, Jimenez. All of those people have only this one spot to go to, the Alamo Plaza. That's it. That's our family cemetery. And the cenotaph has become our headstone. And now I hear, oh, let's just toss it down the street to some, I've heard 2 or 3 locations that are all not accurate. Is that going to be, I've heard sacred, dignity, and I don't think tossing the cenotaph out where there's T-shirt shops and bars and hotels is sacred.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. White. Bill DuPont, followed by Edward Steves.
Good morning, Mayor, members of council.
I've been working in San Antonio since 1996, moved here in 2005. Now professor of architecture for the past decade, teaching historic preservation at UT San Antonio. Alamo Plaza is a place built by the people of San Antonio, and it evolved, shaped by forces of capitalism in a normal way. Alamo Plaza is a wonderful space that serves many users, but there are some flaws. The biggest problem is the inability of people to comprehend the depth of heritage. So I've got 2 points to make about this master plan. Number one, it solves this problem. The vision establishes a whole compound as one place, transforming the Alamo from one little building into a large plaza. The vision makes it a place about the cultural heritage identity of San Antonio and Texas. Now, my second point is that we must be careful because there is a potential weakness. We're dealing with the heart of a dynamic city, and it must not become solely a memorial site. So now in my evaluation of this plan, I'm relying upon my 3 decades of experience, including teaching and consulting in Guyana, Turkey, Cuba, Iraq. And I feel that this plan meets all the criteria for appropriate treatment of this historic resource. And we're fortunate because this plan has the flexibility built within it so that both the greatness of it can be achieved and the potential problem can be avoided. This is a master plan, not a final design, as has been said. So now is our chance, with your approval, to seize the opportunity for the greatness now, and we'll work out all the details later. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DuPont. Edward Steves. Is Mr. Steves here? Okay, we'll move on to James Woosty. I apologize if I mispronounce. And he'll be followed by Brick Fraser.
You came very close. Mayor Taylor, members of the San Antonio City Council, good morning. My name is Jim Weesty, a 6th-generation Texan. I am a retired district chief with the San Antonio Fire Department, and I'm currently the president of the San Antonio Fire Museum, which is located at 801 East Houston Street. Situated directly behind the Alamo grounds in the historic Central Fire Headquarters. The Fire Museum lends itself to not only fire buffs, but to also travelers interested in the history and the culture that is unique to San Antonio. Organized firefighting efforts in San Antonio began in 1854, only 18 years after the Battle of the Alamo. All visitors to our city will be able to see a true interpretation of not only the battle site, but of all that has happened to this place before and after 1836. The combined support of the city, the county, the state, and the endowment, and with the understanding that the design phase will continue with considerable public input, I feel compelled to support the master plan that is being presented today to this council, and I ask each of you to vote yes. On Saturday, May the 8th, the citizens of San Antonio voted overwhelmingly for a city bond program that includes $21 million in support of the Alamo project. This is in addition to $17 million already designated for the Alamo. It tells us that local voters are fully supportive of moving forward with the plans to improve the Alamo and the surrounding area. I urge you to vote yes on this proposal for preserving the battle site that is at the cradle of every Texan's heart. Your vote today is as important as it was 180 years ago when Colonel Travis drew his line in the sand. I thank you for the opportunity to address this critical issue to the future of San Antonio.
Thank you. Brick Fraser, followed by Betty Boucher.
Hi, Mayor and Council. I'm here to voice my support for the redevelopment of the Alamo. My name is Brick Fraser. I'm the owner of Parking Management Services downtown. We manage the parking operations for numerous hotels and parking garages downtown. One of our larger garages is just steps away from the Alamo at the Hyatt Regency. As someone who works downtown many hours of the week, I walk and drive in front of the Alamo every single day. I support the closing of Alamo. I think it's very dangerous right now to drive and to walk in the area, and I think the redevelopment will make it a lot safer for the pedestrians and the tourists to come and visit our city. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Betty Boucher, followed by Sonia Medina Williams.
Thank you, Mayor, Council, and Manager. I'm Betty Boucher, Director of Bear Heritage Department for Bear County. I was encouraged by the county judge and county manager to speak today. My comments are not an official position of Commissioner's Court, as there was not time for them to be considered. However, I believe that they would be in agreement. My experience informs my comments. I was the first woman park superintendent for Texas Parks and Wildlife at the Navarro House and superintendent at San Jose Mission State and National Historic Site, which is half owned by Bear County. I joined National Park Service when they arrived as Chief of Interpretation and Management Assistant, and I was the founding Executive Director of Los Compadres. I hold a master's degree in architecture and was responsible for the largest building construction program in the history of Bear County, including restoration of Bear County Courthouse, the largest historic Texas courthouse. I was the county's lead staff for the UNESCO designation of the Missions and Alamo as a World Heritage Site, and I lead Bear County's tricentennial efforts for 2018. I'm curator of the tricentennial art installation Plethora, and I lead the interpretive program plan for the San Pedro Creek project. Bear County Historical Commission, a statutory function, operates within the department that I lead. I thank all who have brought this great opportunity to our community and wish to protect the one-time chance for state funding of the project. No walls should be constructed around Mission Valero. No walls should separate the historic institution, which was founded with the purpose of evolving into a town and civil community. The Marqués de Valero, who was also the Duque de Béjar, vigorously and actively engaged in nation building for Spain in this area of the vast Bear territories.
Ms. Boucher, if you would wrap up your comments, please.
Yes, ma'am. In 2015, the ICOMOS inspector acknowledged the historic purpose that this would become a town. Spain's vision was this mission and its indigenous population with its expansive holdings would transform, and the indigenous people would establish and become a town. And closing it again with new walls would negate the achievements of the indigenous people, the settlers, the Spanish, and the Alamo defenders.
Thank you, Ms. Boucher.
Thank you very much.
Sonia Medina Williams. Sonia gone. Okay, Sharon Skrobacek, followed by Bruce Winders.
Good morning, Mayor, Councilman, City of San Antonio. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. I'm kind of short here, so I'm having a hard time reaching the microphone. I am a retired educator. I'm a retiring president of 6 years, which is 3 terms, of the Alamo Mission chapter of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas. I'm also on the 21-member Alamo Citizens Advisory Committee. I've been humbled by this process. I've enjoyed the association. I've enjoyed the passion that has taken place throughout this process. Most of the people that I am concerned or that I am associated with are very concerned about the location of the cenotaph. I understand that those discussions are going to continue into the future. I wish to endorse and support this plan as presented today, with the caveat that we certainly will enjoy the continued dialogue about all the issues that surround this plan and the Alamo Plaza and the complex. Thank you very much. Thank you for all of the work that everyone has done. It's been an incredible process and it's great to see so many people from the community come together and in an effort to improve what we have here in San Antonio. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce Winders, followed by Pam Rosser.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Richard Bruce Winders. I've been the curator and the historian at the Alamo for going on 21 years. And what that means is that I've spent many hours out in the plaza talking to visitors, watching how they interact with the Alamo. And so it's led me to the remarks that I'm about to make. I came to San Antonio in 1996 to accept the position of Alamo curator and historian. At that time, the advisory panel assembled by the city had recently completed the Alamo Plaza master plan. The plan was never enacted. We've talked about that this morning. Once again, we have an opportunity to reimagine the most important historic site in Texas. The general feeling of visitors both inside and outside Texas, as well as San Antonio residents, is that the existing situation needs improvement. Here are things on which most critics can agree. The original structures need to be preserved. The plaza is not conducive to reverence or learning. And if you tried to conduct a tour of people out in Alamo Plaza, you would see exactly how difficult that is. Buses, cars, street preachers, and random protesters intrude on what many Alamo enthusiasts considered sacred ground. Remedies to improve the plaza experience should include closing it to traffic, as well as making it level and pedestrian friendly. Moreover, the original outline of the compound should be well marked so visitors see the Alamo was not just a single building, but a large compound composed of multiple structures. It's unrealistic to think that everybody will get 100% of what they want from this project, but as has been pointed out, we have been working together. We need to continue to work together. And personally, I think this project needs to go forward.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Winders. Pam Rosser. And Ms. Rosser will be followed by Lloyd Jerry.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. I'm Pam Rosser. I have been the Alamo Conservator for over 7 years, a San Antonio native, and a graduate from the University of Incarnate Word. Prior to my employment for the Alamo Complex Management, I was a conservator in private practice, working around Texas and the southern parts of the country. Some of my projects include Mission Concepcion, Mission San Jose, and Mission Espada in San Antonio. My specialty is Spanish colonial wall art and architecture. As the Alamo Conservator, the master plan is in the best interest of the Alamo Complex, and we must continue to move forward. Currently, the walls of the Alamo and Long Barracks are deteriorating daily due to the surrounding car and bus exhaust, pollution, rising damp, and the raised exterior grounds around the historic structures, and much more. I have been working closely with George Scarmaeus with PDP, and we see the Alamo as our sick patient. It is an honor for me to work with someone of his experience and knowledge. This team of scholars now on the Alamo plan is renowned and is truly a dream team. Our World Heritage Site, the Alamo, needs this master plan. Since the DRT hired me in 2010, and now the Alamo Complex Management, I have been conserving the historic surfaces as best as one person is able. We must have more focus on this so our children and more San Antonian generations can enjoy our Alamo. The Alamo is over 4,000 square feet, and I'm the only conservator on site. To stop or stall this master plan will only harm the Alamo. The Alamo needs this plan. I urge the city members to approve this Alamo master plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Lloyd Jerry. Lloyd Jerry, followed by Steve Wood.
Good morning. My name is Lloyd Jerry, FIA. However, I'm now a retired architect. It's an honor for me to stand before you this morning regarding the proposed Alamo Plaza Master Plan. Prior to retirement last year, I had been a local architect in private practice for the past 50-plus years. I have served the National AIA Historical Resource Committee, the San Antonio Historic and Design Review Commission, and the Executive Board of Los Compadres. As a fellow member of the American Institute of Architects, I know a master plan will follow required historic guidelines and provide the necessary preservation and conservation plan for the Alamo and the Long Barracks. This has been needed for more than 20 years. This new proposed plan calls for removing all vehicle traffic in front of the idling on the historic battlefield. The damage this brings to the Alamo has been significant. Like this issue, I have followed the preliminary designs and the process closely, and I know that these invited consultants are experts who are recognized internationally, and we now have a reasonable master plan that will preserve and protect our Alamo forever. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jerry. Steve Wood.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Steve Wood. I'm the certified professional tour guide. I'm the president of the Professional Tour Guide Association of San Antonio. As professional tour guides, our members strive to provide our guests with accurate interpretations, utilizing the remaining components of the Alamo and its associated resources. We encourage the planning organizations to develop a design that provides a historically accurate representation of the Alamo in conjunction with an experience that is open, safe, and informative for both first-time and returning visitors. The final design should also take into consideration the role that the Alamo has in the ongoing life of San Antonio and ensure that the Alamo remains integrated into the daily life of our city. Rather than commenting directly on specific aspects of the proposed changes, the PTGSA recommends that changes to the areas under consideration encompass the entire historic sweep of the Alamo's existence to include all cultural groups, from indigenous peoples to the modern population. Respect the integrity of and delineate the historic boundaries of the original mission area. Provide visitors with an interpretive experience that gives a clear, unbiased perspective of the role of Mission San Antonio de Valero in the colonization and Europeanization of Texas. Utilize a combination of reconstruction consistent with guidelines and modern technology to give visitors a clear understanding of the design of the Alamo compound and how that design influenced actions of the defenders and attackers during the siege and final battle of the Alamo. The Professional Tour Guide Association of San Antonio commends the planning group for their work to date on this daunting project. Our members take pride in our ability to give our guests an accurate perspective of the Alamo's role as a cornerstone in the historical Texas narrative. An enhanced interpretive experience will hopefully increase new and returning visits to San Antonio and boost our city's position as the premier tourism site in Texas. We look forward to seeing the final revisions to the redesign and encourage our membership to provide their personal insights and suggestions to the Alamo Planning Organization. Let's vote this thing in.
Thank you, Mr. Wood. Next is the Pacoache Nation. Pacoache Nation with Elder Torres. And they'll be followed by Twain Tharp.
Mayor, it's Pacuache. You already know our name. Pacuache, Indigenous Nation. We are the San Antonio Missions World Heritage Working Committee. You keep with and we have 6 minutes because one of our elders is here. You keep committing violations tras violations of the UNESCO Declaration of the Indigenous Rights of our Indigenous people, one after other, when everything is getting documented. So before I speak on my 6 minutes, you need to get part of the letter. And of course, we are a movement, Forget the Alamo. Basically, I'm going to read it real quick. We reject this plan entirely. Do not approve or consider this ordinance to authorize an extension to a cooperative agreement among San Antonio City, the Texas General Land Office, the Alamo Endowment Board, to provide for design, implementation of the Alamo Master Plan, and approval of the Alamo Master Plan, and not to the conceptual approval of closing Alamo Street from Houston Street to Market Street to Bonham Street. No cenotaph relocation. That is where the defenders were executed by our General Santana. Give them the respect. No further conveyance of the state of Texas, the rights of way, parts of the Alamo Plaza. Again, you keep with this manifest destiny, you keep with this adverse possession. You don't have native title. Neither the state of Texas, General Land Office, neither the city has native title to the land. You took adverse possession to this land. And I appreciate Council Gonzalez that this proposed George Escarmea's 2017 Alamo Plaza Master Plan is very aseptic. They're cleaning it out. And we are asking the World Heritage to put an endangered list, the mission itself of the Alamo. You, the city, decide not to include Alamo Plaza as an original component of the plaza. It's not the Ripleys. We support the Ripleys. They're not desecrating. You made different events of alcohol in the plaza. There's no cemeteries along South Alamo. No, there's no cemeteries along South Alamo and Houston Street. We know where are all our ancestors buried. We also reject, that they are necessary to reclaim. You already claim it. In 1836, by war, you claim the plaza and the site. We reject this plan entirely, the concept of vertical glass walls. You will not do that in Philadelphia at the Independence Hall. Go and visit the Independence Hall. Yeah, you said the word aseptic. Yeah, that's what they're doing, cleaning it. A lightning rod will be presented at a later date. As stated, this is not part of Thursday's vote. So we're rejecting it now because you're dragging and dragging and dragging, and you very fast runners around our teepees. And again, I have appraised Madame Corpus at the repertoire, and I asked, Commissioner George P. Bush to thank you that he gave us today the diplomacy and the protocol as former Commissioner Patterson did to us in 2014. I spoke day before yesterday with Chief Davis, and he said, yes, to remind them that we are Indians, we're expandable. We're expandable. So again, we don't want fake acequia. That's what you want to be. And we're asking for a moratorium demanded, means do not approve these ordinances because you broke the agreement of the intertribal of the original master plan of 1994. And I can keep going and on and on and on. So if you don't mind, Fidel, passing them also the letters. And we are going to amend these together, not only to the World Heritage, I already sent this to the World Heritage Committee, Present Committee, and as well to the repertoire, to Madame Corpus, the UNESCO repertoire on all violations and atrocities. You did it with Hemisphere. You got away. And it was, again, stubbornness, your vision and principles that we heard over and over and over connecting the site, but segmentating the site. We lost the site in Hemisphere.
Thank you, ma'am. Your time is up.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Twain Tharp. Is Twain Tharp here? Twain Tharp. Okay, we'll move on to Lance Aaron. And he'll be followed by Janet Deedle.
Are we just getting 2 minutes today?
Yes, we're doing 2 minutes today.
How disappointing. Okay. My name is Lance Aaron. I was an entrepreneur and former Latin American president for a Fortune U.S. company, and I've administrated thousands of design jobs on both sides of the border. From the cenotaph to the cemetery, all those who lived, worked, died, and were buried at Alamo Plaza need honored. Mayor and city manager, today, you two are on the hot seat. The design firm, the 21 committee advisory committee that was front-loaded with special interests like AIT, who receives hotel occupancy dollars, they are also on the hot seat. Your master plan, not the master plan of the people, is troubling. As the San Antonio Current stated, the group charged with developing the Alamo Plaza redesign received what felt like a public beating from over 200 angry community members. Your process that intentionally excluded the input of those with ancestral affiliation and special knowledge of the cenotaph and Franciscan Mission Indian historic resources is troubling. The George Scarmias team failed to respond for over 6 months to key questions of the course of this process is troubling. Your recommendations, which were fast-tracked, deficient, biased, and delivered in a top-down methodology, removes and relocates the cenotaph and detrimentally damages, desecrates, and disparages the most significant Franciscan Mission Indian cemetery area in our nation with a fake acequia madre. That's troubling. I trust the systemic exclusion of those with ancestral affiliation to both the cenotaph and cemetery historic resources, as well as manipulation of public processes, will be forever memorialized as case study for both politicians to heed and the future cultural resource managers of both Texas and our nation to study. Hopefully, Commissioner Bush and the endowment will replace this design team. The members who, with negligence, may have placed World Heritage in danger. A specialist of Franciscan Mission Indian Cemetery UNESCO World Heritage Conservation would be appreciated. I expected far more from Representative Bernal and the tri-chairs. Bernal, a civil rights lawyer, instead of meeting with the Native American community to address the inappropriate plan for the Acequia Madre de Valero and Hemisphere, as agreed in a city council meeting.
If you'd wrap up your comments, Mr. Aaron.
The city of San Antonio spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in order to grind the people with ancestral and cultural affiliation to Mission San Antonio into submission.
Thank you, Mr. Aaron. Thank you.
And this is
Janet
fact.
Deedle. And
Good morning, Mayor Taylor and City Council. I want to tell you that, well, first of all, I'm Janet Deedle. I'm the president of San Antonio Conservation Society, and we have a membership of right at 1,400. So we have people who contribute to the conversations daily. The paper that you have in front of you has been drastically changed as we've moved through the meeting today because you have come across and met so many things that have been asked for. So I'd just like to read my statement short. The San Antonio Conservation Society has followed the progress of the Alamo Master Plan with interest and we welcome the opportunity to see the renderings prepared by Preservation Design Partnership as a conceptual expression of the plan. That gave us all an opportunity to look. The Society approves the plan to properly restore the Alamo Chapel, which has suffered significant deterioration. While the Society traditionally opposes street closings, traffic adjacent to the Alamo Chapel has contributed to this deterioration, justifying the rerouting of vehicles. The Society strongly supports the creation of a new world-class museum in the Crockett Block buildings, a position that we've advocated for 2 years. We request that the final design incorporate significant interior elements of the 1882 Alfred Giles designed Crockett building. The Society concurs with the inclusion of design elements that interpret and highlight the subsurface archaeological features, and with lowering the plaza to its historic grade. The reintroduction of an acequia and new trees adjacent to the Crockett Block is also welcome. We believe the plan should guarantee continued enjoyment and the use of Alamo Plaza as a civic space with access from the Euston Street, while providing necessary security and protection of the Alamo. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Dietel. Next is Maifi Moore, followed by John Wiesen.
I get 2 minutes. We get 2 minutes. You all took 2 hours. Special interest. You guys are having a lot of fun with the Alamo. The people, I sat in 3 meetings. Mrs. Scully said that there were all these public meetings. No, there weren't. There were 3, because I'm very tuned into the Alamo. And I sat in 3 of them. I sat through at least 9 hours of pissed off citizens. They feel that you are disrespecting the Alamo. They feel that you are disrespecting its history, that you are disrespecting our ancestors and theirs that are buried and honored there, and that you are disregarding the will of the people. You special interests, you people making money, you chambers of commerce, you are disrespecting the human beings and the people that love this Alamo. I don't know that there's any point in my talking. All the business suits and the shiny shoes, it's like, people, who are they? Who cares? Don't close the street. Don't move the cenotaph. You cannot move 50-year-old, he says these are newcomers, 50-year-old trees, oak trees. Their canopy is 1/3 the size of all their roots. You start digging up around the Alamo, you're going to kill all those trees. You cannot move a 50-year-old oak tree. Look what you did at Main Plaza. Can't do it. Can't do it. The cenotaph, what part of what the people want do you guys care or listen to? It's amazing. I'm astounded at the difference between what I've listened to from the people at the 3 public hearings that we were aware of. Thank you, ma'am. I'm astounded at the difference between what I heard there and what I'm hearing here with all you business suits and you shiny shoes. You are not listening or engaging the people.
Thank you, Ms. Moore. John Wiesen.
Hello, Madam Mayor, City Council. My name's John Wiesen. I moved here to San Antonio 18 years ago at the end of my 20-year military career. This is my home now, my own beloved city. To me, what makes the city great is its openness, its ability to welcome and integrate people of all races and cultures. I'm very concerned many elements of this project cut against what San Antonio stands for. Alamo Plaza has been open to public access for 181 years. The Battle of 1836 is an important historical event, but to wall in and freeze the vital center of our city into that year is to not deny the value of what came before and what is going to come in the future. It is obscene to impose a wall around this space and convert it into what amounts to a historical theme park and playground for historical reenactors. The project's stated goal is to recapture or reclaim the Alamo. Reclaim it for whom? Reclaim it from whom? I hear complaints, there's random protesters, there's things going on there. I'm one of those protesters. You are reclaiming it from me, from the city, from the people of San Antonio. And for whom? For the big business interests. As the lady said before, we're hearing chambers of commerce, large business interests, hotels. That's who you're reclaiming it for. The impact of denying the access of the Alamo for free speech is undeniable. It has a power. The power is, in this time of unprecedented assaults on our freedom, civil rights, and our democracy, nothing's more sacred than the rights of free speech and assembly. We will not willingly let go of that space. In the year 2017, it's time to tear down walls, not build new ones. Honor the dead, but respect the living. Please vote against continuing this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leeson. Next is Kelly Epp. Kelly Epp.
I just want to say something.
Ma'am,
There's Mr. Castillo.
Ma'am.
I just want to clear that.
No,
He
no,
signed
your
up.
time is
We
up.
had
Would you
only
please
2 members,
move
no men.
so Ms. Epp can
And
speak?
He has the right under Indigenous Human Rights and UNESCO to speak up.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to yield my time to Mr. Red McCombs, who couldn't be here today, but sent a video message that the AV team has.
Thank you, and I'm glad for my opportunity to visit with you today. I want to thank the City Council. I want to thank the people in the state offices. I want to thank Commissioner Bush. I have so many people to thank because this Reimagining the Alamo is a wonderful project. But there's something bigger than all of these thanks and all of what you've done at this point and what I, as a member of the committee, have done. And that one thing is liberty, liberty, or death. The people who were there knew it was liberty or death. The Alamo is the standard for good people who have good ideas, who are not given an opportunity to express their ideas, and they're looking for liberty. This is more than a line in the sand in San Antonio. This is a way of life that every human being wishes for. The guys at the Alamo paid the price. We have this, and everyone knows in the world now that you can be outnumbered greatly, you can be outspent greatly, but if you've got the right idea for the right program and don't mind sacrificing yourself, then it will happen. That's what we're trying to do with this plan. We want you to think that same way, not about what's going on all around you, but close your eyes and just think what you would have done if you had been here, and it'll bring a throb to your heart like nothing you've ever thought of before. So thank you for looking at the plans to the City Council and to the people at the state offices, all of which have to be approved, reminding you again, this is not the final order, and it won't be the final order for some years, but this is a great starting place, and we hope you endorse it. Put your heart and mind where those people who gave their life put theirs, and then you'll see that at the end of the day, we're going to win. Liberty for all.
Okay. All right, thank you. Okay. That's all the citizens who signed up to speak. For the record, I'd like to note that the clerk received written testimony from Sarah Reveley with concerns about enclosures. Councilman Trevino.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, want to thank all those that have attended today. What we have before us is, again, another momentous occasion to vote on a once-in-a-lifetime project. And we have heard the people. We hear you, and we believe that we have a great process underway. This is a great first step. We intend to continue the incredible dialogue of the many, many issues that we see before us, because the Alamo means so much to San Antonio and to Texas. Therefore, I motion to approve this item before us here today.
Thank you. Councilman Cryer.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Trevino, thank you for your longtime service and leadership on this issue. I think it's important to note, and Lori Houston, are you still here? It has been a long morning and now shortly moving into afternoon. Lori, I just wanted to confirm with you that what we are voting on today, and I see my friend George Scarmea is still here and my friend Gene Powell still here, that what we are voting on today is moving this master plan forward. We are not voting on the final design of every detail of this project.
No, today's vote is approval of the master plan. Once we have approval of the master plan, we'll proceed to those next steps, which include hiring an architect to design the plaza, the museums, and the restoration of the church.
And those will come back to this council for further votes.
The design review process will go through the typical design review process, which is HDRC, and then we'll have more community input. What will come back to council will be the actual street closure, that is a requirement, as well as any conveyance of property to the city of San Antonio, and then any other master agreements. And so those things will come back to council. The design does not, typically council does not approve design. That goes through a different process. However, you will have an opportunity to take action on those other items. But in the meantime, staff will return to council on a regular basis with briefings to include an update on the design process and the interpretation plan.
Well, part of what we're all doing today is listening, as we have all along, and I'd like to point out in response to some comments that were made. I learned a long time ago that what listening means is listening. Listening does not mean do what I tell you to do. I think, Lori, what we have heard and what I've heard from a host of constituents are concerns in several areas, George, that I think you've got to address between now and the final product. The glass wall is not universally well received, even though I personally am very fond of it. Number two, I'm one of those people who, when it goes to Washington, D.C. at 2 a.m. in the morning and 3 a.m. in the morning, takes people to the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Monument and is able to walk up to them at 2 a.m. in the morning and 3 a.m. in the morning. And I'm hearing from both constituents and others a concern that Alamo Plaza, Lori, be accessible 24/7, 365. And there's a perception out there that it is not going to be. And I hope you're hearing that, George and Gene, and that we're going to be able to address that issue, Lori. And I guess my question is, how are we going to be able to address that issue? Are we closing this area today to one entrance and closed at night?
No, we're going to be working through the design. We have heard the community wants to have access to the plaza, and so there will not be one entry point to the plaza. We will look to see how we can make it more porous and provide accessibility, and that'll be worked through the design process. Now, the city will be working closely with the state on the mechanism to convey those rights-of-way and parts of the plaza that are necessary to recapture the plaza. And we will have those discussions during that arrangement, and we will return to council for action on that mechanism.
And I share I understand the concerns individuals have with moving the cenotaph, but I have studied the Alamo, Mayor, at great length for many, many years. The cenotaph was not part of the original plaza. It was added in more recent modern times. It is, as is the Alamo, seriously deteriorated and in need of restoration. And frankly, I'm one of the people who has gone many, many times to that small plaque less than a block from the chamber, which indicates that it was the site of a funeral pyre, and I think it is an absolutely appropriate area in which to relocate the cenotaph, where it will receive the prominence and dignity it deserves. So thank you for your answers to those questions, and George, I know you're listening too. Gene, I am profoundly grateful to you for many things for many years, but I am particularly grateful for your leadership on this project, for your commitment to secure very, very substantial private funds from around here and around the country. And I am profoundly grateful for your patience and willingness to sit through seemingly endless hearings like this and to listen closely to what people are saying, because I know you, like me, takes that kind of information internally and will process it and visit with those people who are doing adjustments to the design. And it's because of that that I'm firmly convinced we will wind up with a final design and a final project that we can all be proud of and that will be a legacy of this city for the next 100+ years. So thank you for that. I'm reminded, colleagues, particularly as I'm winding down my service here, that every city council, and Mayor Peak is one of my predecessors as a District 9 councilman, I am particularly reminded that on this council, we all get to plant some seeds that others will harvest. We all get to harvest some crops whose seeds were planted by those before us. And we have a duty to look both forward and backwards all the time on this body. I've tried to do that for the last 3.5 years. And I think what we are doing with this decision today is continuing that history of planting a crop that others will harvest. I am convinced, after looking at it, after listening to George and others for the last couple of years, that it is going to be a harvest that this council will be thanked for, that people like George P. Bush and Gene Powell will be thanked for, and that the citizens of this community will be proud and thankful that we had the wisdom to step up to the plate and move forward. So with that, Mayor, I enthusiastically support Councilman Trevino's motion and am delighted that we will be moving, I hope, this plan forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Lopez.
Thank you, Mayor. This chamber has had the opportunity over the course of the last 8 years that I've been here to see passion on display, and today certainly underscores that passion that the city of San Antonio has for its heritage, for its history, for its people, for each other, and all the things that make communities like San Antonio great. I think there's a lot of dialogue that has happened that of things that are going to be going forward, and Councilman Cryer, I think you really stated it well. We're at a point where we need to make some decisions, but nowhere close to making the final decision. A lot to be done, and I think that under any circumstance, an unlimited imagination, which is, I think, what we're all striving for, is what is the order of the day. If you can just real quickly, while I tell a quick story, put up slide number 3, because it talks about the master plan vision, and I'll tell the quick story that I shared with George and a few others in my office. When we were talking about this, I had the privilege several years ago of traveling on a trade mission to Japan. I think some of you have heard me tell this story before. And when you first get there, you're trying to acclimate your body to the 12-hour difference between noon and midnight. And so the good thing to do on the very first day is to get out there and look at the city, look at things from a cultural perspective. And I had the opportunity to go several places, but where I wanted to go was to the Japanese War Memorial. The reason I wanted to go there, and I understood that it was probably going to be about a 4 or 5 hour walk through the museum, because I wanted to see how the Japanese depicted December the 7th, 1941. As an American, you can imagine why we would be kind of interested in someone's perspective, because I think all of us have a vision of what had to have been in the world's thought process when that happened. And so I did. But to get there, I had to start from the beginning. And I walked all the way through. By the time I got to the point in the museum that got to December the 7th, it became almost an insignificant incident from their perspective, because it set up all of the trauma that Japan was struggling with. The empire was trying to create a civilization and maintain a civilization, but it tells their story from their perspective. It certainly does not diminish the event of that day, because I also have been to Pearl Harbor, and as you walk through that museum, through that area, you certainly have the sense of what happened that day and the great sacrifices that were made and the lives that were lost on that, that morning, that Sunday morning. The point that I'm making is that that I'm trying to make here is that engaging, telling the story, including an interpret, tell the story in depth, all the things that are in our plan are the kinds of things that I think we need to embrace, and we are embracing in what we're doing here with the Alamo and the Alamo area of the plaza and all the components of it. And what I want to have happen for people that are not from here when they come here is to enter that with one particular, probably a movie they saw a few years ago perhaps, and have a vision of what they think the Alamo is all about. But to walk in here and realize there are many, many things before and after that date that make it an incredible point in time and an incredible point in history. To know that it goes many, many years, many hundreds of years back with indigenous people, with folks that were compassionate and passionate about our community and making sure that we made a cultural investment that was going to withstand time, I think is what we want people to walk away from the Alamo. Certainly on a commercial side, we want to do for those individuals that come from out of town what the Japanese War Memorial did for me. I want to go back and see it again, take a second and a third perspective. I'd love to go, and next time I will, go to Hiroshima and see how that is being translated. How is the world learning from the events of our history, and how can it shape our future and our vision towards each other? If there is a positive story to be told and something that we can influence by virtue of making this critical, significant investment in our community, I think we must do that. I think doing anything short of that borders on irresponsible governance, and I know that this body does not embrace under any circumstance irresponsible governance. For those reasons, Mayor and Council, I was honored to second that motion of Mr. Councilman Trevino, and I want to thank you personally for the hard work that you put into this, along with all the other folks that are working really, really hard. This is indeed passion on display. I think the entire city, regardless of what side of the issue you are on, what version of the side of the issue, because I think all of us recognize its significance. Everyone is to be commended. The passion should continue to run deep and long. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Gallagher.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I appreciate this opportunity to talk about this most important subject. I'll tell you, I really want to add my sincere appreciation to all those who have been involved in this process. It's been absolutely amazing. And I include those people who don't necessarily agree with what we're proposing here today. The one thing I would like to stress, though, is I think that throughout this process, we're going to have flexibility, because I think we will be learning as we go through this that there are changes that are going to have to be made. So I don't think any of this should be etched in stone. I think we should all be ready for the changes that are coming along. And let me give some examples of that. One of them is the glass wall. I don't like the glass wall. And I think there's a lot of people that would agree with me about that. There's probably a better way to do it. And so it's that sort of thing that I think we need to look at carefully as we head down the road. Another one is the accessibility for disabled people. Are we doing it right with this plan the way it is? I think we're going to find out that maybe there's some changes that are going to have to be made. So, for example, a complete closure of Alamo Street, I'm not sure that's the way it ought to work, but it's something that we should be looking at very, very carefully. And I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to see the Alamo, and let's not do anything that would deprive people from that possibility. Another one is the cenotaph. I have to disagree with Councilman Cryer and just remind him, I think this is a historical monument that has to be taken care of. In fact is, I know it's historical because it was put up before Councilman Cryer was born. So let's take a close look at what we can do about that. It could be that we just need to, as we're repairing it, maybe move it slightly in one direction or another, but we don't have to get rid of it altogether and move it away where people would no longer be able to see it. So again, I bring up the word flexibility. Let's make sure that we are flexible when we do that. The last one I wanted to mention there was parking. I think we've got to be careful in that regard too. Let's make sure that as we do have our tourist friends come in, that they are going to have a place to park, and that it's going to be easy for them to visit our wonderful Alamo. The last thing I want to say, though, Mayor, is that What we've got to do is preserve our Alamo, preserve the structures that are there, and I think that this plan does that, and for that reason, I will be voting for it. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Warwick.
Thank you, Mayor, and again, thank you, Councilman Trevino, City Manager Scully, and all of the folks that worked very hard on this for a number of years. I remember hearing the conversations in passing and now seeing everything in place. I'm proud of the work that we've done as a city, but I know that the work is not done. So, Laura, if you could come up for 1 second just so we could answer some of these questions that I've been receiving and just make sure that we understand that we're not making the final decision on everything. We're just making a couple key decisions, right?
So we are approving the master plan, and in that master plan, you're approving those 5 key concepts. And then you are conceptually approving components that require future council action or other action by other regulatory bodies. So we will return to council for the street closure recommendation, for the conveyance recommendation, as well as any other amendments to the view shed or any other master agreements that must be approved.
So what will we not return to council on that's being, so the cenotaph, is that one of the?
The cenotaph will be taken up during the design of the actual review of the plaza through the design process and HDRC process.
So that's also coming back to council?
That will not come back to council.
Okay, no.
That is done through a design process. And then, so that will not come back to council, but that will go through another public process and then ultimately, city council will be approving the conveyance of the streets and the conveyance of the plaza to the state of Texas.
But that is a public process, the HDRC process?
Yes, it is.
The wall or enclosure, will that come back to council?
No, so what council's approving is to delineate the footprint. And that delineation of the footprint was identified in the 1994 plan and in the 2012 plan. How we delineate that, there are several ways, and that is a design issue as well. We have heard the concerns from the community that they want it to be accessible, and that includes physical accessibility and intellectual accessibility. And then we've also heard the concerns about shade. We'll be addressing that, and we'll continue to have more public engagement, and that will be incorporated in the design process. But the design process will be a public process as well, with more public meetings, and the Community Advisory Committee will remain engaged in that as well.
How long do we expect this process to take place? Are we speeding along, or it should be a lengthy process, correct?
The next step is for the management committee to hire an architect for those different design opportunities. So we need to hire an architect for the museum, the plaza, and the restoration. That process has not happened. It will happen, and then we'll have the architect on board, or architects will do more public engagement, and then the process. So we don't anticipate that process happening right away. There are several steps we need to get there before we do that.
Do we have any idea how many opportunities for public input we have along the process?
We have heard that there needs to be more public input, and we have incorporated that in our process. So all the public meetings, HDRC, Planning Commission, all of those are public. They have public hearing processes, but we will continue to engage the advisory committee, who has been engaged throughout this process, and we'll continue to have more public dialogue.
And then, speaking of the public protest in front of the chapel, is that decision being made today?
That decision is not being made today. However, we have identified opportunities for that to expand with the closure of the streets and the reopening of the 1936 garden. We have more opportunities for public assembly, and the area, the Plaza de Valera area, will expand from 1.24 acres, which is currently where people do protest. It does not include the area outside the streets, outside the church, but that 1.24 acre area will expand to almost 2.9 acres, and that'll be an opportunity for people to exercise their First Amendment rights.
So at what point in the current timeline do we expect that all these design decisions will be more or less finalized?
So the next year, we are going to be looking at doing we have a lot of work to do in the next year. So 6 to 12 months. However, the conveyance document, how we convey that, will determine those questions you have regarding the operations of the plaza.
So we've already been having these conversations for approximately 2 to 3 years on this current format, and we're going to add another year of more public dialogue, more discussions, more input, and also more tweaks and changes to the design between them.
Yes, and the entire process, the next 7 years, will include more public dialogue. Our plan is to go through design and implementation and engage the public throughout that process.
And if anything comes up that may be a surprise, how will the public be informed of these things?
Well, we will continue to provide updates to the mayor and city council like we have. We've been providing those updates every 2 to 3 months, and we'll continue to provide public input and public engagement opportunities, as well as those regulatory processes also have public input opportunities in them.
Do we or will we have like a website, like what's happening at the Alamo website? What phase of construction are we in? What phase of design are we in?
Yes, and we do have reimagine.org that has that information, but we will continue to provide updates that way as well, just like we did with the archaeology campaign.
Right.
And we will do that throughout this process.
So reimagine.org is the, okay. So I feel very confident that we have all the right people in place in order to move these things forward. And I also feel that we have a solid master plan, which is what we're actually talking about today, not actually the design, and all of these issues that the public have brought up and will be discussed at future public meetings. So I don't think there's any reason to delay the vote today, and I'm in strong support of this master plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Nierenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Lori, could you come back up? First, I want to commend the staff as well as the committee, Councilman Trevino, on the work. It's really difficult work, especially when it has to be sustained over such a long period of time. And I don't think there's any argument about the fact that the Alamo is probably the most important spot in San Antonio, in Texas, and perhaps for those who are interested in this kind of history, the United States. Lori, the concern has been, what does the space mean to San Antonio, considering its recent history going forward? So give us some assurances about the public process and what decision points are there for the council with regard to all the concerns that have been made.
Well, first, I do want to stress that the plaza, to include the plaza and the Mission de Valero, will continue to be a community gathering space. And in fact, we're expanding that space from 2.2 acres to almost 9 acres. So there'll be more opportunities for ceremonies and celebrations and community gatherings. The current location of the Plaza de Valero, which will be 1.24 acres, but with the expansion of with closing of the streets, we can expand that to almost 3 acres, and we'll be able to provide that opportunity for First Amendment rights to be exercised. We will continue to have public dialogue through the design process and refine those opportunities, and we will have more public meetings, go through those regulatory bodies, and then we do return to council for the approval of the street closures based on Planning Commission's recommendations, as well as approval of the conveyance of the street that is necessary to recapture the plaza and the public rights-of-way in the plaza to the state of Texas.
A lot of the comments, though, have been made about the civic space, the First Amendment space. Are those still part of the process, and when the process is completed, who ultimately makes the decision about where those spaces are?
That'll be down to the design process that we have. However, our guiding principles say that the Mission Plaza, we need to have a place of remembrance. We also need to activate it. And so we have committed, there will still be community gatherings and celebrations. And then, so civic space still exists.
But in the same way that we currently enjoy today?
Yes, you will still be able to practice your First Amendment in that area at the Plaza de Valero, and actually you'll be expanded from 1.2 acres to 2.9 acres.
Okay, well, Councilman Warwick asked the question, we see demonstrations, we see community gatherings, protests right in front of the chapel. Is that something we will see in the new plan?
No, the plan, the vision and guiding principles are to provide a place of honor and respect. And so we will most likely not see protest happening there, because you also have to have education going on in the plaza, which will be activating daily, and we'll still have the ceremonies that we have daily. But the First Amendment rights, those protests, will be less than a couple feet away in the Mission de Valero area, which will be expanded as well.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think that that's where the rubber hits the road with regard to the design. I mean, I think that the concern that I continue to pick up on is, and many of them have already been addressed. We wanted to retain the trees. The trees are part of the living history of the grounds. They're going to remain. The traffic patterns certainly are going to be part of the road closures, and those are going to come back to council. With regard to other elements of the design, the architectural issues, those are so much part of retaining a civic nature of the space and how people enjoy it today. I think that's where the concern is. Is there going to be any opportunity for the City Council to be involved in the ultimate design of whether or not there's a wall, for instance?
Well, first, we will provide regular updates through City Council, and then we also have HDRC review, and we'll have more public meetings. We continue to listen to the input. We are still listening, and when we have an architect for those individual components, they will continue the listening stage as well. And we will go through the HDRC review process, and we also will provide updates to council and to the public.
Okay, and I guess I hear you, and I know you hear the concerns, but the language of the ordinance is concerning to the extent that we can hear concerns and we can address concerns. Those are two different things. And so I want to make very clear that for me, and I truly appreciate the work that you all have done. I really do. It's an extraordinary plan, and I have been very supportive of it. I continue to be supportive of the plan. But for us to respect all the layers of history, which we want to do, for us to revere the space, we also have to recognize that the history of the space is as much about the vibrancy and the life that's occurred in it. You know, the defenders, for instance, who died there, decreed their sacrifices on this area that is part of civil disobedience. It's one of the fundamental components of civic life in the United States. And if the Alamo, which I agree is one of the original and most distinctive areas of gathering for civil disobedience, I think that's part of its history that we have to respect. And part of that history is it being available and open to the public. I don't think it's mutually exclusive for us to suggest we want to protect it, revere it, sanctify it, but also keep it open to the public, because part of that reverence is the fact that it's been in the public domain. So I believe it must be protected, it must remain accessible, and I believe that we do have the ability to do it, which is why I continue to want to see the plan come back. We can address these minor, what could be minor issues as we move along. But if we do seek to respect the settlements, the indigenous history, the civic space, all of the unified leadership that needs to occur, also needs to respect the fact that it continues to be part of life in San Antonio. And I say to the committee, take down the walls. We have to do that. I just want to make sure that when we move forward, we have the opportunity to make those decisions together. It's not just a design phase that's going to hear protest and move right along. So those are my comments for now, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor, and colleagues. If you would please indulge me, I have some prepared remarks, and then I'll have a few questions. As we plan to celebrate San Antonio's 300th birthday, it is fitting that we give proper attention and focus to Mission San Antonio de Valero as part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site. While we know it as the Alamo, we cannot forget that it was first a Spanish mission for Native Americans. The Alamo has become an iconic symbol of the Texas War for Independence against the Mexican dictator, General Santa Anna. I agree it has not been given the respectful setting that it deserves, and I support our efforts to finally give it the attention it needs. But as we begin to do so with this plan, we cannot ignore the fact that over the last 180 years, it has been enveloped by the city's growth and inevitable changes in the surrounding urban environment. The Alamo has been a central part of San Antonio's civic, culture, and social life. It is interwoven with history for all of our residents, no matter their ethnicity or place of birth. The Alamo has also become our special place that we share with visitors from all over the world. And we are right to make it more inviting and more respectful of its historic role. While I support the basic concept of the proposed master plan to provide a setting that preserves the dignity and sacredness of this hallowed ground, it is my belief that we can do so without closing it off to the community and making a space that is more welcoming for visitors, that is welcoming to our visitors, but first to our own residents. Many of my residents and constituents I've heard from say that we have been walled off for too long from the center of town by freeways, railroad tracks, and other barriers, and we want open access to the monument where brave Tejanos died in the Alamo fighting for freedom from a dictator. I believe that we consider the Alamo plan with the knowledge of a history often forgotten and seldom mentioned, that the fight for Texas independence was really begun 23 years before under the co-leadership of José Bernardo Gutiérrez de Lara in San Antonio, where a short-lived Declaration of Independence for the state of Texas was proclaimed on April 6, 1813. This was immediately followed by the Battle of Medina, the largest battle ever fought on Texas soil, just 20 miles south of San Antonio in Atascosa County, where almost 1,000 Tejanos and volunteers died at the hands of the Royalist Army that included Lieutenant Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. It was this battle led by Tejanos that he remembered when he returned to the Alamo in 1836. This is why many people wonder why, in public statements about the Alamo, often invoke the names of Travis, Bowie, and Crockett, without mentioning those of the 6 Tejano leaders who were actually born in Texas: Juan Ambraillo, Juan Badillo, Carlos Espaller, Gregorio Esparza, Antonio Fuentes, and Andres Nava. These Tejanos were part of Captain Juan Seguin's volunteer army companies who fought valiantly and sacrificed their lives for Texas independence. When he formed the companies, Seguin is reported to have declared, "Texas shall be free, independent, or we shall perish with glory in battle." It is reported that Seguin escaped death at the Alamo only because he borrowed James Bowie's horse to seek help a few days before it fell to Santa Anna's soldiers. One can only ask why there is not enough attention given to the role of Seguin, who late in 1835, with his Tejano volunteers, joined the Anglo rebels to defeat and evict Mexican forces from Mission San Antonio de Valero. In other words, the Alamo was available for Travis to use and led the stand against Santa Anna because Juan Seguin and his Tejano volunteers had fought to drive out the Mexican army the year before. During the revolution, over 150 Tejanos were attached to Captain Juan Seguin's companies and fought against the Mexican army, not only at the Alamo, but also at Anahuac, at Bear, Goliad, and of course, San Jacinto. Regrettably, after independence, as mayor of San Antonio, he and other Tejanos felt the rising Anglo newcomers' hostility against them, considering all Tejanos treasonous Mexicans. After receiving a series of death threats, Seguin relocated his family to Mexico. Now, I know this discussion is about the master plan, and we'll hear later about the centuries of culture and historic overlays, but I think it is important that we cannot consider this plan without considering the overall history of the site and the role it has played from its very beginning and the changing face of San Antonio. Over the years, as an open plaza, the area witnessed the presence of national, foreign, state, and national leaders, and countless visits by our city's residents over multiple generations for celebrations and communities. It is a symbol not only of liberty, but of the open and welcoming culture of the people of San Antonio. So I'd leave those prepared remarks. I thought it was important to bring it all together about one of the reasons why we're here today. And I know that many, many people have spent years preparing this plan and preparing this document, but I think it's also important to note that the council members only saw this prepared master plan 2 weeks ago. Before then, the master plan had been developed. There was lots of opportunity for community input. There's no denying that there was lots of open meetings, lots of discussion back and forth, but the council members did not see this until weeks ago. And so regarding the master plan, there were some guiding principles that I think are all legitimate and worthy. Restoring the church, establishing clarity and order, recapturing the plaza by street closures, a sense of arrival, museum and Crockett and the Waldworth buildings. Those are all very important, and I look forward to supporting them all, but never in there is there any mention of the people. And this is why I wanted to add a guiding principle that the area remain dedicated to the historic use as a public space. And I add that now as a motion, asking for a second from one of my colleagues to include this as a guiding principle. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilman Saldana. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll just wrap up my comments, Mayor. Thank you. And so I just given those comments, adding the guiding principle that we continue to keep the people and the space as historic, as well as the physical buildings and spaces that were all there. I'm very concerned, and I do have one question for Lori that was just brought up here on the council. When was the decision made that the final design and that many of these issues were not going to come back to council?
Cheryl.
Yeah, so in the tri-party agreement between the General Land Office, the City of San Antonio, and the Alamo Endowment, it speaks to that issue. It says that the final approval is with the Mayor of San Antonio and the Land Commissioner with the state of Texas. We are making recommendations, regular updates to the City Council, receiving your input as we have every couple of months over the past year and a half. But that agreement was approved by the council in the fall, in October of 2015.
And so the decision not to bring these whether it's the cenotaph, the footprint, the guiding principles, all that was determined in 2015. And I feel like that was done before we had an opportunity to see a master plan and to see ultimately how it would all evolve. I've been in enough behind-the-scenes meetings to know that there is a definite desire to limit activity in the plaza. There's mention of guards around the plaza so that there is not what would be considered inappropriate activity in front of the Alamo and in front of the plaza. And while I understand that the area is deserving of respect and it needs to be memorialized, the reality is our history to many of us, especially Latino families, has not been known, and we have not been given the opportunity to really learn about our history. And if we knew more about it, and we could share it with all of our neighbors, then there would be an organic respect for this space, and we wouldn't need to hire guards, and we wouldn't need to have that. It would have happened organically over time. But because our history has developed in such a way that we haven't had that opportunity, there is often inappropriate activity that happens in front of the plaza. But I do believe that as over time, as that history gets known and people regain respect for their history and their culture, that will evolve into a more respectful place. And it's not necessary to put guards in front to limit what some would consider inappropriate activity, which is also up to the individual whether or not one thinks activity is inappropriate. So I'm do want to thank all of the hard work of the people who spent years and years working on this plan. I believe that we are still evolving, and while I don't want to delay approval of the master plan, I do appreciate this one amendment that would allow for more inclusion of a historic public space in front of the Alamo. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Councilman Saldana.
Thank you, Mayor, and I hope I'm coming through okay. And so let me start first by saying that I have no doubt that today we are going to vote on a master plan, and it is going to move forward today. That shouldn't be a hesitation in anyone's mind. Let me start by asking just a from first of all, let me thank the folks who are in the room as well, too. At the end of the day, what we've been getting a lot of City Council is feedback, many forms. Sorry, am I through okay? Just quick,
Yes, we can hear you.
So yeah, we've been getting a ton of feedback from a lot of community members through emails, through calls, letters that have come through to our city council office. And what we've realized, and what I've had to tell many folks who have called our office, is that, you know, this is a process that takes a lot of listening. And what we need to be very good at is not just listening, but getting that feedback and turning it into something that we do something with. You know, frankly, I've told many people that when you put a master plan out and it has a design, what you're going to get is praise, criticism, and a ton of feedback, but you need to be responsive in some way. And the problem is, oftentimes when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, that can lead to problems as well. But the bottom line is that we are only invited to the kitchen, and I say we, 10 council members and mayor, because the state at the end of the day need something that we have, which is control of that Alamo Plaza area. And what I want to make sure is that we're not relinquishing too much of a final say, because we are the cooks that are in this kitchen that ultimately are the only ones that exclusively are responsible and attentive to exclusively the public. And because of that, I think we need to have some sense of a final say on the design. So I want to rewind. I don't think I heard very clearly what the city manager discussed was a decision that happened in 2015 about the final design.
And your question, Councilman?
So the Councilwoman Gonzalez asked a question about when did we as the city council relinquish control of the final design? And
Well,
you mentioned something that happened in 2015.
Yes. Well, first, let me back up and say that the guiding principles that were developed by the Citizen Advisory Committee, appointed by the mayor and council, develop guiding principles to advance the process. This is not just about a master plan today, but the evolution of that over the past 3 years. And so the council adopted those guiding principles in 2014, in late 2014, to allow us to go forward another step and to use that to develop a master plan. In 2015, with the new land commissioner, we entered into this tri-party agreement. So yes, we, I wouldn't say they, the General Land Office, we as a team are working together on creating this new experience, a respectful one for the Alamo. And yes, we're talking about vacating the street for cars and to allow pedestrians, but it's part of an effort. We don't have sole decision-making. We're doing this all together. And so the design per the 2015 agreement that the City Council approved does allow the master plan to come back to the council as concepts, but that the final design would be decided by the land commissioner and the mayor to move forward. However, I will say that there are other city council steps in this process. The vacation of the street has to go through a formal process through the Zoning and Planning Commission and then come back to the City Council for final approval. So there still are other approvals that the council will make, including the conveyance of the street to the state. And we have not worked out exactly how that conveyance will occur and how the ongoing operations and management of the plaza and the public space around the Alamo will function in the long term. So that we're working on. And I would just say about public space, you know, these chambers used to be wide open as well. But we now have guards, so to speak, at the entrances to allow ingress and egress. I don't think any of us like that. It is the day in which we live. And the same goes with City Hall. There didn't used to be metal detectors in the building, and people used to flow in and out. But there are rules and regulations in all kinds of public spaces to varying degrees, and we adjust those over time as is necessary. And I think what we're talking about is that as we develop the plans for the Alamo, we're talking about several $100 million of investment into this very important asset. And so we'll have to consider and further develop the plans as to how we protect the asset and protect the public's right to be a part of that. And that's what we will continue to work through over the upcoming months and years.
Thank you, Cheryl. I think the only thing I would say in response is that if we are going through an evolution of what time is asking of us, which is to adjust in ways that make things evolve with modernity, whether it's security and or the relevance of the space, that we are as respectful as we can through that process. And I think the respect needs to be heaviest on the feedback that we keep talking about we want to receive, which is that from the community. And I've gone on the record about a month ago talking about the glass walls. I said I was comfortable with the glass walls, but I also have to be cognizant of the fact that these decisions ultimately evolve with the community input. So that's not to say that I don't agree to some enclosure, but we are adding here our endorsement of one particular provision, which is the recapturing of the historic Mission Plaza. And said another way, I think that the ultimate recapturing of the historic Mission Plaza means that we do what we're going to say, which is, as a city council today, we're going to vote and endorse that concept. What I don't want that to mean is that there is license to recapture the historic Mission Plaza only in the way that 1/3 of the stakeholders agrees to. So the question is still the idea that we may be, in some sense, relinquishing what is the final concept on the recapturing portion to mean whatever the folks within the designing room will cook up versus what we will be able to say as a final statement as a council. Because let me repeat again, whether we want to say this or not, the design is not the city council's control. It is a tri-party decision, but I guarantee that we're going to receive 100% of the blame at the end of the day, and we'll receive 100% of the calls and the emails. And for that purpose, I want to understand that the vote that we're taking today allows us in the future, this is where I'm now going to ask us to think about the future, allows us in the future to disagree 100% with any design element. And in that disagreement, can the city council, and this is a conversation I hope to get some back and forth with the city manager, with Lori, can the city council say, you know, we don't want to convey the street. We're not satisfied. We're getting a blunt of community input and a blunt of community outrage about a specific portion. So we hold back on the conveyance. Is that a scenario that may exist in the future?
Mayor and council, yes, it could. However, I would just point out again that representing the city of San Antonio are Councilman Roberto Trevino and I, and we are coming to the city council regularly every couple of months with the updates on the plan to get direction from you as we represent the city on this tri-party agreement. And we will continue to take your comments and suggestions and requirements into consideration as we represent the city on that tri-party arrangement, which is the management committee.
So I think what you're saying is trust us. We're going to come up with a good design. It'll be good. You'll agree with it, and the entire council will support it. But if that is not the case, then you are assuming we will still have a chance to disagree with a final vote on a conveyance of the street. Is that true?
Yes, the council will have an opportunity to vote on the conveyance of the street. That is something that will have to come back to the city council.
So last question I have here, I don't want to belabor this too much, but am I speaking factually when I say that currently today, the city controls just the Alamo Plaza portion of the specific area that we're talking about?
And the street, yes, that is correct, plus the street, Alamo Street. Alamo Street and the plaza, the state of Texas owns the church, the long barracks, the buildings, as well as the buildings they have purchased across the street. The Crockett Street, the Walgreens, and the Palace buildings. Those are owned by the state.
So then does that also mean that the backside of the barracks will be now public? Will that have to be conveyed by the GLO, or will that be just deemed public without a conveyance to the city?
That is part of the property owned. If you're talking about the garden behind the church and the long barracks, that is owned by the state of Texas. And we're looking to open that up. You know, today it is walled in with a stone and iron wall, and it is not a part of the original historic site, and we're looking to open that up to public use.
Well, I want to be clear. I think I heard a motion for an amendment from Councilwoman Gonzalez. I didn't get to really hear the specific language of that amendment clearly. Is there a chance that I might be able to ask Councilwoman or someone to repeat that?
The guiding principle adds as a final guiding principle, remain dedicated to the historic use as a public civic space.
So I can understand that there's folks who may not want to make any adjustments now, as we've gone through a 21-member committee over a year, and what I've seen is a very respectable position for us to have on 5 guiding principles. I've also heard 2 things being said, and I don't know which is true, which is that this is not the final piece of the puzzle. There's plenty of times to change things along the way. The second piece is that you should not add anything now because it may affect something along the way of this process. So adding this at this point in the process, can I hear from Lori or the city manager about why that might be a point of contention? I know that this is a 21-member group, but I think I consider ourselves folks who might have some input in this as well, that we can toss back and forth about what that amendment might mean to an ultimate conclusion here, but I don't see a disagreement with supporting it.
Okay, Councilman Trevino would like to answer that.
Councilman Trevino here. So, while I respect the amendment, this was asked of me just yesterday, and I pointed out that something like this should respect the process. And we have members of the 21-member advisory committee here today. We've stated here this morning that we would be continuing that process, and I would ask that if we're going to be making amendments to guiding principles that they crafted, that we allow a process that includes the 21-member advisory committee to make sure that we are following a process that we have started. There's also the process in which we entered with the state and the endowment to make sure that everybody understands exactly what is being asked for and what is being stated, so that we can move forward all in unison. I think that the issue is certainly a worthy one to talk about through a process, but I would hope that we could take that up through a process that includes our 21-member advisory committee, including our tri-chairs that are here today.
Great, thank you, Councilman. Councilman Trevino, you and I have been talking about this issue for a very long time, and you are to be commended for the amount of weight that you put on your shoulders with this issue, speaking on behalf of the entire council. I think that your voice is one of the few voices in there that has to respond to the public criticism in a number of ways, not the least of which is with your position. I mean, this is a position in which you, distinct from many others who are on this committee, have to answer to the public in a very serious way. So thank you for putting yourself in front of this. You and I talked about making sure that we support this today and keep the progress moving forward. I will say that, at least for the sake of a discussion, I will second the Councilwoman's suggestion of an amendment, because at least as I look at it, the idea of public civic space is not a term or a concept. added to a master plan that scares me with regard to where that will maybe alter or change a ultimate design. I think it will not in many big ways, but it does provide a sense of a voice from the council. So I will go ahead and do that, and hope that if we continue the dialogue, that we can continue adding our layers of input while we still can. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just for the record, we already have a second to that motion. It was Councilman Nierenberg. Councilwoman Villagran.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here today. I think we've had a very good discussion and very good conversations here, as we have for the past couple of years, but I think it's important, as our Alamo and Mission de Valero deserves, this kind of engagement, this kind of conversation that is happening here today. But what will not stop either is what I'm convinced of, too, as we move forward. I do have a lot of questions, but good thing a lot of the people have answered those questions. I do still have, I do want to first and foremost thank our Alamo Advisory Committee. You all were appointed by the mayor and the council. You all have been very passionately engaged in the conversation, and you all still have a say and a stake in this. I thank you for your times, for your meetings. For my appointee, Ms. Mejia, thank you very much for all of your work and dedication for this and moving this forward and speaking and using your voice today as well. I do want to thank Ramon and the American Indians in Texas, who have been a part of this for so very long, and who still have, who will still be engaged and who have been engaged very much, not just our conversation about Mission de Valero, but for all of our World Heritage, our missions, our Spanish colonial missions, and our missions of our city. I think this framework that you have presented right now is important, and I think we have made a lot of progress, more than I think we've ever made tangible steps before, ever in the past. And I do want to add assurances. I think if Lori can come up, and maybe I'm also looking at the chairman, that the advisory, from what I'm seeing here in the next steps, that our advisory committee, the Alamo Advisory Committee, is still going to be part of this public engagement.
Yes, they will, and by actually extending the cooperative agreement, they're identified in that process as well. So the 21-member advisory committee will continue to be engaged.
So they're identified in this extension?
Yes.
So that adds assurances to all of this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And how long is this extension going for?
It goes through design and implementation.
Okay, and also for the record that all of these public processes, from design and review, from planning commission, from historic design and review, those are all open to the public processes?
Yes, those are our public processes we will follow for those key decision points that we'll be coming back to council for.
And those are also opportunities where the council members can also go and show up and have a voice too?
Yes, and in addition to the management committee's regular updates to the council.
Correct. Okay, thank you very much. And another is, one of the things that I wanted to ask too, because some questions that I've been getting from my some of my constituents, it's a great, it's a very big and daunting task, Councilman, that you've walked into and stepped into, but it's a great one that we're working together on. And one of the things that I hold very responsible is this is part of our World Heritage designation, our inscription. This is part of the entire story that we are telling. So I do have questions because some of my constituents and others have been asking questions about if this happens, if any part of this conceptual plan moves forward, will this hurt our UNESCO designation? So I wanted to ask Shannon Miller if she could come up. One of the things that I was looking through from the technical, and I know many of the people that were here today also have are very familiar with this too, but the technical evaluation that has come up, and just for the record and letting others know, viewing this and hear, that it was actually in the technical review where it says the authenticity in setting is unfortunately lost in some places, in particular Mission Valero. And it also says ICOMOS considers that Mission Valero is the only serial component in which authenticity is limited in a number of aspects, for which its inclusion in the series could be debated. However, ICOMOS also notes that Mission Valero contributes an important element to the series as it was the foundation of the San Antonio missions. ICOMOS considers that the authenticity of the whole series has been justified and that the authenticity of the individual sites that comprise the series has, despite concerns regarding reduced authenticity of Valero, been demonstrated. Why I'm sharing this is because as the integrity of the series would be reduced with the exclusion of Mission de Valero, ICOMOS considers that its shortcomings with regard to authenticity can be accepted. So, Shannon, I just wanted to ask you a question about this, and I think one of the weak points with our serial nomination was also the Mission de Valero because of the authenticity of the way it states now and because of the urban development that's around that. Could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I mean, you're exactly correct. What they pointed out is the concern about the existing urban development around the site. And so, professionally, I don't think there's anything that's being proposed that would hinder our World Heritage designation in any way. If anything, it would, things like removing the businesses across the street and having the museum there instead, and making the overall atmosphere more kind of reverent or commemorative would actually kind of enhance from that aspect. And so I think in some ways it would alleviate some of the concerns that they had in reviewing the site.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I'd like to add that Dr. George Skarmeas, he was actually the chairman of the U.S. ICOMOS. And this plan is in line with World Heritage standards, and that is something they've been very, very aware of throughout this process.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that we could make those points here because those were some of the concerns that were voiced to me. And we've had a lot of conversation and discussion right now about having access, and I think it does have its place, and I believe that we'll continue to have this conversation with the access for our entire community. And when I have people showing me pictures of 100 years of being able to be right in front of the shrine, to be right in front of the Alamo, and pictures of Roosevelt going up and down, and cars, and a number of businesses that were right next door to the barracks, etc. But I also believe in that process, is in that 100 years, that because of the use and the business and the urban development in and around the area, I think it also muted many of the voices and muted many of the stories of our ancestors and of our heritage in the area as well, and it got lost. And we're still trying to find space for even more relics from the Alamo, and that's why the museum and moving forward with the museum is important. And here, what we have is to restore the church in Long Barrack, delineation of the historic footprint, recapture the historic Mission Plaza, repurpose the buildings, and create a sense of arrival. And just like when we're able to go to Mission San Jose and the walls that are surrounding the area of Mission San Jose, you walk through the gates and you have that sense of arrival. You have that sense of somewhere where you are going, and you can get taken back and really step into somewhere where you know there's a story to be told. Thank you, Lori. And as a native daughter of San Antonio, a native daughter to this area, with blood in my veins that go to someone, Toribio Lozoya, who lived in the Mission and was part of the Battle of 1836. Believe me, this is extremely personal and extremely important to me, my heritage. but not just to me, obviously to all San Antonians, to all Texans, to people of the United States and internationally, because it tells the story of the Americas. People want access, but we also want people to spend more than 8 minutes there and just seeing a shrine and not knowing our full story, my ancestors' full story. This is why this master plan and this conceptual step forward is very important to tell the story of the heritage of all of San Antonio and to get back and reclaim the stories of our ancestors. And it will be even enhancing the story of our World Heritage inscription, and is representative again of 4 of the 5 missions. I think this is important, and I think it takes us to an opportunity that I don't know when we'll ever see this opportunity again, because we have so many pieces in place, with the possibility of getting the money from the state, with all of the parties willing to work together. We have this opportunity. And I hear the concerns and I hear the amendment from my colleagues here, but I also know that with the chairman and with the GLO and with Cheryl and Roberto, you all are also accountable to us, and us and the residents of San Antonio, this is our plan. This is not your plan. This is all of us, and we will be sure to hold you all accountable because you have the updates that you give to us. And with that, I know that it's important. We're going to get this right, and the guiding principles will be moving us forward. And I am going to trust in what you are telling us here today is the truth. But not only that, I will continue to stay engaged, and I will continue to hold us all accountable so we can make sure that we get this right. Thank you, Mayor.
Right, thank you very much, Councilwoman. Councilman Cryer. Councilman Cryer.
Thank you, Mayor. I will be brief because the hour is late. I wanted to speak up with deep regret to disagree with my beloved colleague, Councilwoman Gonzalez, with whom I've worked on so many things. I have some real-time knowledge of free speech litigation and public demonstration litigation. I come from a university that has treasured the areas that it has set aside for those purposes and has gone to great lengths, as Gene Powell, former chairman of the Board of Regents, knows, to guarantee that those spaces and those rights are maintained and indeed expanded through the years. I am convinced that the proposed plan that has been laid out by the planners not only maintains the ability for substantial free speech and demonstration, it dramatically increases the amount of real space set aside for that. So if anything, there is greater opportunity, greater space, greater resources available for those that want to use that site to demonstrate their constitutionally protected views and their constitutionally protected rights. I remember well that my good friend Henry Munoz, who still is my good friend, when he became vice chairman of the Chamber of Commerce, liked to point out to people that his first time at the chamber was to demonstrate against the chamber with his father. So I understand the commitment and the passionate belief we all have in protecting those constitutional rights, and I think this design does exactly that, and because of that, with regret, I'm going to vote no on the amendment. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you. Well, thank you to all my colleagues for all your very thoughtful comments, and thank you so much to all the citizens who took time out of their schedules to be here in the chamber today and share your thoughts and concerns related to this project, and also appreciate that you attended some of you also attended the public hearings that we had on this project. And I agree with the land commissioner when he said that passion is good. Yes, all the passion on this is great. Well, I am really excited and ready to move forward with this conceptual master plan and to take action today to show our commitment to working with the state of Texas and the General Land Office. And I'd like to express my appreciation publicly to Commissioner Bush for not just for being here today, but for his commitment to making these improvements to the Alamo and preserving it in a way that's fitting, and to all the folks in the legislature who've been advocating for the Alamo. And thank you to the management committee under the leadership of Gene Powell, and thanks to Cheryl and Roberto for representing us all very ably on that committee and spending quite a bit of time, and to the citizens who've been involved with the Alamo Advisory Committee. We appreciate you as well. I know we all do agree on the importance of preserving and enhancing the building that's come to be known as the Alamo, the Mission Church of San Antonio de Valero. And that certainly is the first of several key pillars that include preserving all the historic structures at the site, closing that street, creating a museum so we can, in a comprehensive way, tell the story and share that history, and then also moving the cenotaph. We're going to accomplish those key pillars through recognizing the archaeological and historical boundaries of the Alamo complex and demarcating them in an appropriate way, and also respecting the historic, spiritual, and civic significance of this space. And so in respect to the amendment that was made, first off, I'd like to thank Councilwoman Gonzalez for her very thoughtful statement regarding the meaning of the Alamo. I believe it's important for us to respect the process that's been put in place, and it would be appropriate for any amendment to those principles to go through the advisory committee. Though I will say that I believe that in all our hearts and minds, we, those of us that have been working on this project, hold that concept dear, that yes, this is important civic space for our community. And so I support the staff recommendation that we adopt this draft conceptual master plan, and I'm pleased to see that the team has listened to the community concerns and made a number of significant changes and improvements. Though there are still many details that will be discussed in the future. What we're moving forward on today is, again, conceptual plan that shows our commitment to supporting this project and the partnership that we have with the state of Texas and the GLO as the state considers making a big investment, and as the voters of San Antonio have spoke loudly that this is worthy of investment as well. With our 2017 bond that was passed, that does include significant funding for the Alamo. I also just want to note that moving forward, we will be looking at all the design solutions that can create that sense of enclosure, rather than agreeing today to proceed with the glassed-in plaza. Personally, I remain open to the full range of solutions that the design team or citizens might bring forward. I'm looking forward to that discussion. Again, I'm really grateful to our representatives on the management committee, and we all intend to have a robust feedback loop to communicate with council and citizens as the process evolves. So I think, do we take? We're going to take up the amendment first. So we have a motion for an amendment to the guiding principles offered by Councilwoman Gonzalez. Please vote.
Yay.
Okay, that motion fails. Now we'll take up the motion by Councilman Trevino to approve the conceptual master plan? Please vote.
Yay.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you so much, everyone.